Isn't it about time for somebody's favorite radio program?
Yeah.
97.3 ESPN presents The Sports Bash with Mike Gill.
When I'm driving, I got a guy on the radio who talks to me. I can't see him, but he talks to me.
Now, live from inside the Ocean Casino Resort Studio, here's Mike Gill.
You think you know me?
Josh Hennig, Nick Earnshaw, filling in for Mike Gill one more day on 97.3 ESPN. Mike and his team have reached the championship round, Nick Earnshaw.
How about that? Good to see you, Josh. Glad to be filling in alongside you. It's going to be a fun show. Good luck to Mike Gill's team. How about that?
Yeah, I don't know when or if I will get an update from Mike, to be perfectly honest. The last thing I heard from him was I was asking him where do they go if they win today for the next round, and I haven't heard back from him since.
Oh, he ghosted you, huh?
So, well, here's the thing with Mike. For those who don't know, Mike Gill and I, when we message each other, there are times that, let's be realistic, Nick, Mike kind of forgets that he's texting me.
See, I have this problem on occasion, too. Like, I will read a text from somebody and then totally forget to respond. Like, in my head, I responded, and then I just won't text back. And I'll go back, oh, I forgot to respond to this person. I do that all of the time. And I feel bad for the people who text me at times and don't get a response. That's exactly what I did. I responded in my own head.
So we got a lot to get to here on the Sports Bash. For the next 4 hours, we got the usual suspects joining us here on 97.3 ESPN. Mike McGarry from the Press of Atlantic City joining us in less than 30 minutes. Bob Wankel from Crossing Broad at 3 p.m. Football at 4 with Jeff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast. An extended version of Knicks Nuggets today. All that and more here on 97.3 ESPN. And, Nick, a little news for the folks out there. If you are going to listen to the Sports Bash and 97.3 the rest of the week, I will have tickets to give away for this Friday night's boxing event of the summer at Tropicana Showroom in Atlantic City. 97.3 ESPN will be there to watch the fights, so you guys can join us. And you can win tickets a little bit later this week, so keep it tuned here at 97.3 ESPN. But, Nick, before we get to anything else, can we talk about the Phillies weekend, please?
Yes. Oh, I'm dying to talk about the Phillies weekend.
So let me start with this. And I made the comment multiple times over the weekend. I think I was more active on Twitter Saturday night than I've been half the year. The Phillies look like that they were either hungover or had a jet lag or something the first 2 days, right?
Yes.
Like, it did not look like a Phillies team that was 62 wins for the All-Star game. It didn't look like a Phillies team that really knew that they were no longer on vacation. And you could argue they are very fortunate to come away from this weekend not getting swept, because the way the offense showed up, or shall I say, didn't show up this weekend, oh boy, no bueno, senor.
Not good. Not good. I was in Cooperstown this weekend for the inductions. I was keeping tabs.
Bragger.
Throughout. I'm just saying. It was a fun time. Mike Schmidt was there. He was part of the festivities. I did not see him like in close proximity, but he was there. He's at the inductions yesterday.
You saw him from a distance.
I did. But
you're kind of like that episode of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, where they're trying to wave down Donovan McNabb.
Yes.
And Donovan McNabb is like, do I know you guys?
Who's this guy? Where's he from? Who the heck is he? But I was keeping tabs on the Phillies throughout the
I thought you were going to say keeping tabs on Schmidt.
No, not on Schmidt. No, not on Schmidt. But on the Phillies in general, the 2024 Phils. Watching those games over the weekend, it was like a Monday morning for them, essentially. Like, it was a Monday morning after a long weekend, coming back to work. You could honestly call it a Tuesday morning, because if you wanted to have off on Monday, usually you have a long weekend like that. It was like the bats were just silent, right? They just looked sluggish in those first two games of the series. And, heading into Sunday, it's like, are they really going to get swept against the Pirates? And you really didn't even see the Pirates' best arms. Like, you didn't even see Paul Skeens in this series. So to come away yesterday, they looked more dominant. They looked like the Phils of old. And how about our South Jersey product yesterday, Josh?
Listen, Tyler Phillips has been the only winning pitcher for the Phillies' last 2 wins.
That's crazy.
It gives you an idea of how rough it's been for the Phillies, losing 2 out of 3 in Pittsburgh, the Oakland series, which obviously went wrong in so many ways, right? So you've won 2 of your last 6 games, Nick Earnshaw. And both of those have been started by South Jersey's own Tyler Phillips. I think it's safe to say he has earned some more starts coming up.
I think so. With where they're at right now, I mean, Mercado hasn't been great. You still have Turnbull's hurt. Taijuan Walker's hurt. I mean, Tyler Phillips has, really gone out there, pitched extremely well. Even when he came in relief in Atlanta, like he pitched really well then. And now the last two starts, 2 wins for the Phillies. Yesterday going 6 innings in that ball game and not allowing a run. I mean, that's dominant stuff right now, and he's earning the 5th spot. And if he can eat innings for the Phillies, keep these guys fresh, even when maybe Walker or Turnbull come back and you go to that 6-man rotation for a couple weeks if you want to, he's an innings eater. You need guys that can eat innings during the dog days of July and August to keep the Wheelers, the Nolas, the Rangers of the world healthy.
It's interesting you mentioned those other guys because what I find interesting about this upcoming stretch of games, look, you got out of Pittsburgh alive. The schedule doesn't get any easier, Nick Earnshaw. Mm-hmm. It's not like you got a bunch of, Miami Marlins and Colorado Rockies coming up in short order. You got 2 of the top teams from the American League Central when you go to Minnesota tonight, and then come home Friday for the Cleveland Guardians. And we now know who is pitching. Ranger Suarez is scheduled to pitch tonight. Zach Wheeler tomorrow night. So you mentioned those 2 starters, Nick. How closely are you watching these 2 guys, knowing that both of them were pretty much questionable up until the last 36 hours?
Yeah, and we had the discussion on Friday, Josh. Who would you rather start Monday and Tuesday? Rangers getting the start today. How about that?
So does that tell you, do you read into any of that to say, hey, is Wheeler's back worse off than Suarez is back? Did Wheeler tell the Phillies, I prefer to pitch these days versus that day? Or are the Phillies purposely putting Wheeler to set him up for July 29th? So it's him versus the Yankees. What do you think was going on here?
Yeah, for me, well, it could have been. Hey, it could have been. Well, it could be that, like mentioning all those things. It could be that complicated, Josh. Or they could have just flipped a coin. I mean, it could have been that simple, right? All right, you go today, I go today. All right, we'll figure it out. Heads or tails, but. I don't know. I don't know if necessarily it was that deep. I think they just kind of made the decision. Ranger go today, Wheeler, and maybe looking down the line because remember, this is a gauntlet a little bit right here. You got the Twins, the next 3 games, and then you have the Guardians. The Guardians have been really good all season, and then the Yankees following that. So you have a tough stretch going forward. I think they want those pitchers to be lined up for the end of the Guardians series, the early part of that Yankees series. So if you're able to get the Wheelers and the Nolas against those teams and set it up that way, you're in a good spot, Josh, because you're going to need your best arms against those type of teams from the AL.
Folks can chime in 609-403-0973. Any concerns about the Phillies after this past weekend? I have a little question for you because I'm a little concerned. The Phillies' best hitters, they struggled a couple days here, right? Harper, Turner, Schwarber, boom. All 3 of them had some moments over the weekend, but none of them were overly consistent. Any concern that this is a sign that this team is starting to come back down to earth?
No, I don't think it's a concern, but, we've seen them go cold before, right? It just sticks out. NLCS in against Arizona last year. They all went cold at the same time. You just hope that doesn't happen at the wrong time again, right? You're in the middle of July. You're heading into August. It's a long season. I'm not going to look at one series coming back from the All-Star break. You had a long layoff. I'm not going to look at it where, they're going to come back down to earth already. We're 3 games in after the All-Star break. Now, I'm not concerned there, but I am concerned it could happen at the wrong time again. And that makes you wonder, what are you prioritizing at the deadline? Because on Friday night, I mean, that was a bad loss. Alvarado giving up the walk-off on Friday, like, it makes you wonder, what are you going to prioritize at the deadline? Or are you going to go after both, like we've talked about in the past? Like, for me, the bats, I think, will be fine. The offense, I'm not as concerned with as the back end of the bullpen. Right now, the bullpen is 14th in ERA, 3.86 ERA from the bullpen combined. They need another arm, I think, back there. Alvarado has struggled over his last few times out. I'm not loving what I'm seeing from him right now. I've seen talk, maybe you move Soto and put him in higher leverage situations instead of Alvarado right now, maybe to get him back on track. I don't know. There's a lot of talk out there, and we know the Phillies are interested in a bat, and they're probably interested in another arm in the back end of the rotation, because you're going to need those guys towards the end of the season, end of the playoffs. Alvarado's got to step up. He's got to be better. It was a combination of things this weekend, Josh, that made me a little bit concerned, but it's only 3 games from the All-Star break. I think they'll be okay, but there's definitely concerns with certain aspects of the offense and the pitching staff.
The concern I have is Alvarado right now, left-handed hitters are 4 for 44 against him this year. That's a pretty amazing ratio, right?
Yes.
So if Alvarado is that good against lefties, should we just use him situationally? Should we stop trying to use him as an 8th or 9th inning guy and maybe turn him into more of a fireman?
No, I still have confidence Alvarado will get back on track. Sometimes you go through funks, right? Like, I think he'll be okay. That's why I think right now, maybe you take a step back and only use him situationally to try and get him back on track so you can use him in the 8th and 9th inning. But I don't think he should be the locked-in closer right now, and that might be kind of what the Phillies are missing. That's why you go out and make a trade to add another arm to this bullpen. But right now, I'd probably use him in less higher leverage situations. Maybe you try Soto out in some of those big spots, right? Like, and see what he has. Because remember, you gave up a decent amount to go get him. He was an all-star in Detroit a couple of years ago. So why not try it out with Soto at times? But remember, this is the best team in baseball. They've been really good. There's a lot of ebbs and flows throughout the season. I think this is one of those flows where they're coming out a little sluggish from the All-Star break. Had a few days off. Let's see if they can get back on track, but they do have some tough teams: Twins, Guardians, Yankees coming up.
Text board is open, 609-403-0973. Your DMs into 973 ESPN mobile app, powered by First Bank of Sea Isle. I'll get to Jeff from Ocean City in just a minute. The other question I have coming out of the weekend is, do we consider at all the reality that the Phillies don't understand how useless Christian Pache is?
Oh, no. Here we go.
I mean, the dude played in 2 of the 3 games this weekend. He did almost nothing at all of use. Yohan Rojas had 2 amazing plays in center field on Saturday. Why is this guy not starting on Friday instead of Pache? I mean, this Christian Pache must have blackmail on the Phillies. I mean, it is absolutely an embarrassment and insane that this loser is on this team still. You cut Whit Merrifield. The Braves are so desperate with 200 injuries, they brought Whit Merrifield down there. And now Christian Pache is sitting here still swinging a bat in a Phillies uniform. And I just keep asking, Nick, why? Why?
I mean, listen, maybe they're trying to showcase what he has.
Showcase how bad he is?
I'm just saying, I don't know. What else are you going to do with him? I mean, are they going to cut him?
Cut him.
Do they want to try?
Cut Merrifield.
Do they want to try and get some value for him? That's
what
what
value are you going to get from Pache?
I don't know. You throw him in a trade.
Sandwich?
Listen, he's still young enough where he could go somewhere. He is. He's still young enough. I'm not defending him. He's been bad. But, maybe you're trying to showcase him a little bit here so they can try and get some value for him at the deadline. Throw him in as a kicker in another deal. Who knows what they're trying to do? I don't know why he's out there. I think Rojas is better than Pache, but I don't get it. But that's the only other explanation I would have at the moment, because the deadline's coming up. He's a young player. Someone's going to take a flyer on him if you try and move him at some point. So why not? He's young enough. He was regarded as a top prospect in the past. Maybe some team will be like, we'll try him out.
A lot of players considered top prospects.
I'm just saying.
Mickey Moniak was considered a top prospect. And look,
the Angels took a flyer on him. They traded for him. They went out and got him.
You think there's a team out there that says, we're going to fix Pache? Is that what you're telling me?
I would 100% think that could be a possible case. 100%.
I hope you're right, because, man, watching him play for this team is one of the most embarrassing experiences of this season. Like, you could argue with this season, with 63 wins and with 8 All-Stars, right? And with, Trey Turner having this hot streak and Alec Boehm with the league leaders RBI and Wheeler and Suarez in conversation for Cy Young Award and all the good vibes with Hoffman and Strom, 2 bullpen pitchers in the All-Star game, right? And then you got Christian Pache just to bring us all down. He's bringing down the mood, Nick.
I understand that. I'm not saying he should be in the lineup. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying maybe they're showcasing him. Maybe that's why he's had an uptick in playing time recently over the past couple of games, right? That's the only other logical reason I could see. A team maybe wanted to take a flyer on a Christian Pache. We saw it with Mickey Moniak. We thought he was dead in the water. They got some value for him. Maybe the same case could happen here with Christian Pache because I don't understand why else he would be in the lineup. I mean, he has not been a good contributor to this team really all year.
So you don't believe in my blackmail theory?
No, I don't believe in that at all. 0%. It's a showcase for other teams, maybe to add him in as a kicker, say, hey, take a flyer on him. You can give him more at-bats than we can.
I don't know. It's political season. I'm in the conspiracies right now.
All right. Yeah, well, there's plenty of them out there.
609-403-0973. Jeff from Ocean City chimes in and says, I have zero concerns with the Phillies. It's a long season. There have been many more highs than lows. I'm interested in who we are adding at the deadline. That's from Jeff in Ocean City. Jeff, we're all interested. Who they're adding at the deadline, right? Like, we're all kind of looking around like, what are we adding to this team? Because at the end of the day, Nick, I'm just not convinced they are going to mortgage the farm for one player. We have Bob Wankel coming up at 3 o'clock today, and he kind of made a similar comment on Friday's show, right? That he said, look, unless you're getting something massive, I'm not trading the Aiden Millers and the Andrew Painters and the Justin Crawfords. He says maybe you trade other guys, but I don't think you're going to get a superstar return, which means you shouldn't be giving up star potential players.
Yeah, it's tough how they're going to utilize this deadline. I mean, we've seen Dombrowski in his past, over the course of his career as an executive. He has given up prospects when he knows they got a shot, his team has a shot to win. We've seen that in the past.
Or he's trying to get a specific player.
Yes, exactly. So we've seen him do this before. I wouldn't love them to give up any of the top 3, Painter, Miller, or Justin Crawford. But if you're going to want a guy like, I don't know, Miller, like we've talked, Mason Miller, like we've talked about, you're probably going to have to give up at least one of them. You're probably going to have to do that because they are going to ask for a lot. They want to go get an impact bat. You may have to give up one, or you're going to have to give up a ton of prospects in that case. So I'm not in love with the idea of giving up the top 3, but if you want to go win a World Series, this is your window. Right now, this season or next season is when you want to win a championship. You have the best record in baseball. You got to go for it. And sometimes you got to give up prospects. Because remember, they're unknowns. They're unknowns. We don't know what they're going to be. So maybe you do have to give up one of them, and you're going to have to dip into your farm system a little bit to get something to make the impact the Phillies right now.
609-403-0973. Chris from Millville chimes in. He says, Pache is a career 179 hitter. What could you possibly get in return?
I think you could add him as a kicker to a potential blockbuster type deal. That's the only explanation I would have at this point with where he's at in his career. I mean, he's 25 years old. He still has time to go out there and maybe turn things around. I mean, Mickey Moniak's a perfect example. You mentioned him earlier. He's he was a guy that similar Pache situation. Didn't really have it here. You send him off and you get some value for him. At 25 years old, you can get a little bit of value for him. He's been a top prospect before. I get he hasn't really proven it in the major leagues yet, but he could be a kicker in a deal that could put you over the top to make that deal.
Mickey Moniak in 47 games with the Phillies.
47? That was it?
He played 47 major league games with the Phillies.
Wow. How about that?
He had 1 homer, a 129 batting average.
It's even worse.
214 on base percentage. How do you have a 172 slug? That's actually borderline impressive.
And they got value for him.
So, listen, Chris from Millville, as much as I hate to say it, Nick Earnshaw may have something here. Nick Earnshaw, to my chagrin and to the rest of us who don't understand it, we have just proven Nick Earnshaw's point.
Yes.
That the Phillies got something for a absolute nothing burger in Mickey Moniak. So if they got something for Mickey Moniak, they can get something for Christian Pache.
Yeah, and that's the only explanation I could have as to why he keeps being put in the lineup, because he is not contributing at all. At all. So that, and the deadline's like right here. It's right in front of us. That's the only way that they're going to put him in the lineup, is they want to showcase him a little bit, show that he has a little bit of a glove out there in center field, and you can be like, hey, you can give him at bats. We're not going to be able to give him consistent at bats. You can send him to a bad team if you're getting a good player back. That's the only possible way. Maybe you send him back to Oakland. He'll get plenty of at bats there.
I will say this. I'm looking at Moniak's stats right now. Moniak is such a boomer bust player.
Yes, 100%.
Dude, in 184 games with the Angels, in 184 games, he's averaging more than a strikeout per game. He has 208 strikeouts.
Wow.
But he also has 23 homers.
That's crazy. That's crazy. I mean, listen, they got, what was that? The Noah Syndergaard trade, right?
Yeah, that was Syndergaard.
Back in 22.
Yeah, because Syndergaard was the Moniak deal, and Logan O'Hoppe was Brandon Marsh.
Yes. So, listen, I mean, Syndergaard started for them in the playoffs that year. I'm just saying, he 8 innings down the stretch. Like, now you have a Tyler Phillips in your own system who's going to eat innings down the stretch, but they got value. I mean, not great value, but you can get something for a Christian Pache. There's going to be a market out there. You're not going to get an all-star for him, but maybe he's a kicker in a big-time trade, or you could send him for a minor trade like a Noah Syndergaard, adding another arm to the pen or something along those lines.
Well, Noah Syndergaard is available.
Yeah, he is available. He's still available at this point. I mean,
for those who didn't see, I think it was a few days ago. I forget what website it was, but I wanted to throw my phone because one of these like news aggregator websites put out a headline. It said, "Former Phillies pitching star trying to make return to Major League Baseball."
That's a crazy headline.
And
That's a crazy headline.
I'm scrolling through the article like, who are they talking about? Who is this former? Because I was racking my brain like, who was a guy who was a good pitcher for the Phillies who might be available now? And it took me like 6 paragraphs to get to the answer. And there's Noah Syndergaard's name. And I'm like, immediately exited out. I'm like, this is insane.
This is nonsense, Josh. Nonsense. Noah Syndergaard played less than half a season here. It gave you some innings here and there, started a playoff game, whatever. But that was really it.
I mean, Christian Pache has done as much for the Phillies as Noah Syndergaard.
Yeah.
Is he going to be a former Phillies star?
Who, Christian Pache?
Yeah.
He could be a former Phillies star at some point. I mean, he played center field, platooned out there. He's a former top prospect, so you could say it like that. Former top prospect who also was a star for the Phillies. That could be the headline going down the line from Christian Pache, Josh.
As long as he didn't make your top 10, 25 or younger players in Philadelphia.
Oh, you wait till you find out about this list. I can't wait to have your head spin.
Yeah, so for those who didn't hear, last week Mike Gill and I discussed this on the Sports Bash here on 97.3 ESPN. Josh Hennig, Nick Earnshaw filling in for Mike Gill one more day. Mike Gill and I had a couple of disagreements. Not like crazy disagreements, but like, one guy higher than another. I had a couple guys on my list, he had a couple other guys on his list. Like, it was like a reasonable, evaluation. It was more of an evaluation of talent in Philadelphia and less of a argument. But I'm getting the feeling, based on some of the snide comments you have made before this show today, Nick Earnshaw, that you and I are going to have a legitimate debate later today.
Yeah, because I have a problem with the premise. I have a total problem with your premise in general of the list, of how the list should be conducted. I have a total issue with that at the moment. So I made some adjustments to the premise of the list, and I'm going to make your head spin.
Adjustments.
No, I made some adjustments to the rules here for this list.
By the way, did you watch the WNBA All-Star game this weekend?
I did not get to see the WNBA All-Star game. Remember, I was in Cooperstown. all week.
I know. Stop bragging. I'm telling you right now, if the NBA All-Stars played half as hard as the WNBA All-Stars, the NBA All-Star game would have the greatest ratings of all time.
They were giving effort. See, I love to see that.
It was more than effort.
Good.
They were hard fouls.
Good.
There were moments in that game. Well, first of all, for those who didn't see it or hear, I was all over this game Saturday. Like, I couldn't stop watching. Because once the Phillies were done, I had to watch something good in my life. Right. You know what I mean? The WNBA All-Stars beat the U.S. national team.
Yes, I did see that. And you know what else I saw, Josh? I saw Kelsey Plum was trying to guard Caitlin Clark like full court and all. Like that shows me the effort that they were given.
There were hard fouls in this game. Arike Gumbawale, she won the MVP. This is the second time she won the MVP in this format against Team USA. She has a grudge against Team USA. They don't want her on the team, man.
This is ridiculous. The WNBA, good on the WNBA for showing effort in an all-star game, because none of the four major pro sports in baseball, basketball, football, hockey, I mean, you don't see a ton of effort. So I'd like to hear that they're giving effort. And some of the clips I saw, like the one I mentioned with Kelsey Plum, guarding Caitlin Clark, we have full court press. I love this.
By the way, Angel Reese came off the bench, had a double-double.
Wow.
Off the bench.
Off the bench?
She didn't even start.
This is crazy. See, I mean, we need this effort across all sports. Bring all-star games back, would we? Come on, let's do it.
I mean, the men can learn something from these women.
Yes.
I'm just saying. I don't know what the ratings were. I haven't seen if the ratings have been out yet, but just based on the amount of tweeting that was going on Saturday night, I'm assuming there was a good amount of people like myself watching a real basketball game instead of America barely beating South Sudan.
I'm a little upset I did miss this, because we would talk about the All-Star game now for a couple weeks, with the baseball All-Star game being last week. I just want to see effort. I think that's what fans want to see. Like, fans want to see the effort from these players in the game. They're the best of the best in the world. Just show a little bit. Just show a little bit in these games. I mean, NBA, it's gotten out of hand. Football's flag football now. I mean, that's how bad the effort was in the National Football League. So I'm glad to see the WNBA All-Stars showing a little bit of effort.
I mean, Asia Wilson took out her own teammate on a drive to the basket.
Wow. See, that's awesome. That's all people want to see that. The ratings will go up.
And guess what?
Games.
She didn't even help her teammate up.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Angel Reese had to run over and help the lady up.
That's crazy.
Angel Reese was like, look at her like, I feel bad for you. Your teammate just like decked you.
Just show effort, would we? Come on, guys.
Caitlin Clark set an all-star game rookie record for assists, and she was 3 short of breaking the all-time all-star game record.
That is amazing. See what happens when you show a little effort here. People, we're talking about it right now, Josh. We're literally talking about it because you showed some effort.
Yeah, talk about a game, a real game.
A real game, a real all-star
Not practice.
Not practice. We're not talking about practice. No practice today.
He's Nick Earnshaw. I'm Josh Hennick, filling in for Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN. Coming up on the other side, we get to more of your text, 609-403-0973. Cole from LBI. Your text and more coming up a little bit later this hour. Press of Atlantic City's Mike McGarry joins us next on 97.3 ESPN FM. Don't forget the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. It's free thanks to First Bank of Sea Isle City.
B21. It's
Introducing Zaxby's new chicken finger tacos. One with pico and creamy chipotle ranch, and the other with bacon and avocado ranch. Chicken expert since 1990. Taco expert since now. Woo, saucy! Zaxby's.
Gill
And I am the voice of the voiceless.
on 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app.
Josh Hennick, Nick Earnshaw here, filling in for Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN FM, 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City. We'll continue the conversation as the Phillies return from Pittsburgh to now head to Minnesota. A little rough weekend for the Phils as they continue their road trip. Plus, Eagles report for training camp tomorrow. All that and more. Mike McGarry from the Press of Atlantic City at acpressmcgarry.com. He joins us right now on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. Mike, welcome in. How you doing today?
Doing well, guys. How are you?
Doing all right. So, Mike, I said before you came on that for me, I felt like the Phillies almost looked like they were like jet lagged or hungover or, had senioritis or something was going on with them. And I almost feel like they're lucky, right, to get that win yesterday because the way they looked in the first 2 days, they didn't look great, Mike.
Yeah, well, I thought they fell prey to a bad bullpen on Friday night with Kerkering and Alvarado both struggling and both contributing to blowing a lead. So the Phillies easily could have took 2 of 3 from the Pittsburgh Pirates. But I would agree, right now the Phillies are in a middle of a, as I wrote today at PressofAC.com, a mini case of the summertime blues here. They've dropped the series to Oakland. They've dropped the series to Pittsburgh. These losses have kind of shown a couple of their weaknesses, and they'll look to get back on track. And against Minnesota, a 3-game series up there, and then the Guardians come to town for a potential World Series preview, and then it's the Yankees after them. So rough schedule ahead for the Titans.
Hey, Mike, it's Nick. Josh and I, before you jumped on, we're talking about Christian Pache a little bit. What do you think the reason is he's been getting a lot of playing time here over the last couple of games before the All-Star break and now this past weekend as well? Do you think it's kind of a showcase maybe to move him at some point, or what do you think that is?
Yeah, possibly. I think more than anything, it says that they just do not trust Brandon Marsh to hit against left-handers at all. They've given Marsh an opportunity. Last time I looked, he was 7 for 48 against left-handers, so he's unplayable against left-handers. And you're going to put Pache out there. I do think, if they make a move for an outfielder, a right-handed hitting outfielder, which I would fully expect them to do before the July 30th trade deadline, that Christian Pache is going to be a guy who, 8 days from today probably won't be on the Philadelphia Phillies.
I certainly hope not, because it feels like he's a huge waste. But, Mike, we looked it up earlier. The Phillies did get something for Mickey Moniak a couple of years ago. So, I mean, is it possible, Nick Earnshaw brought this up earlier, is it possible that Pache could just be like a throw-in for one of these deals coming up?
Yeah, absolutely. He could be a guy that, another team takes back. Absolutely. I just think he doesn't do enough for me to stay on the roster. I think Weston Wilson is a guy who has proven himself or has gotten an opportunity to play here a little bit and has, hit the ball. He can play left field. He has good speed. He has power. He can play some infield positions. Christian Pache, to me, is just too one-dimensional. And if he's not going to hit, I don't think you can carry him on your roster. So he would be the odd man out whenever they acquire the right-handed hitting outfielder that I believe they're going to get before the July 30th deadline.
Mike McGarry for the Press of Atlantic City joining us here on the Sports Bash. Josh Hennig, Nick Earnshaw filling in for Mike Gill here on 97.3 ESPN. Mike, it was a rough weekend for the Phillies' four best hitters. Schwarber, Turner, Harper, Bohm. I mean, they had a couple moments this weekend, but they all seemed to have struggled for the majority of the weekend. Any concern about the Phillies coming, maybe are they just coming out of the All-Star break sluggish? Do you think that this team is coming back down to earth a little bit? What is your take on the Big Four struggling?
Yeah, I'm not concerned at all. I mean, keep in mind what they scored. They scored 6 runs yesterday. They scored 6 runs on Friday night. They should have won Friday night's game. If Alvarado and Kirkland don't implode in that game, then they take 2 out of 3 from the Pirates, and we're probably having a different conversation right now than we are. So I'm not concerned about those guys. Harper had a home run yesterday. Turner's been great. Bohm's been great. Schwarber's been excellent. I'm not concerned about the Big Four. And like I said, they did score 6 runs on Friday night. They got 6 runs yesterday. If this team scores 5-6 runs, a major league team scores 5-6 runs, they should win the game. They just didn't win Friday night because of the bullpen.
Hey, Mike. Alvarado has an ERA right near 10 in the month of July right now. Do you think it would be best if Rob Thompson maybe took him out of those higher leverage situations, maybe used a Soto in the 8th or 9th inning and tried to get Alvarado back on his feet in maybe like the 6th and 7th type of innings?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you saw that yesterday, right? When he go in and he pitched pretty well yesterday, but the game was 4-0 or 5-0 when he went in the game. So it was not a leverage situation. I think you saw that yesterday. And you never, maybe Alvarado looked a lot better yesterday than he looked on Friday night. Like all relievers, he tends to blow hot and cold a little bit. So maybe yesterday's outing helped get him back on track. But yeah, you're absolutely correct there. And I think Rob Thompson started to do it yesterday.
Mike, you mentioned Alvarado. Left-handed hitters are 4 for 44 against him this year. So is it as simple as saying just only use him situationally moving forward? Is he put himself in a position, I don't want to say he relegated himself, but has he put himself in a position that he's really only good for one type of, a situation coming out of the bullpen moving forward?
Right. Well, a couple things there. Obviously, I think Alvarado's got good enough stuff to get lefties and righties out. So far this year, he has struggled with that, but he has remained very, very tough, as you just pointed out, against lefties. So at the very least, you're in a situation where if you acquire a bullpen guy and acquire a guy with some save experience that you can put at the back end of that bullpen, that allows you to move Alvarado up and face a tough pocket of lefties in the 6th inning or the 7th inning. So it makes the whole bullpen more effective. So, yeah, if they get, obviously perfect situation, Alvarado is lights out, can get righties and lefties out. But next best case, you get a closer, a guy who can replace Alvarado in that back end, and you move Alvarado up to where he can come in and get a couple of tough lefties out in the 6th inning, 7th inning, maybe even the 5th inning of a playoff game.
Mike, would you say, because all the rumors going around of them, targeting a reliever as well at the deadline along with a right-handed bat, do you think there's a preference whether they want to go lefty or righty? Mason Miller being a righty, Tanner Scott's name's been thrown out there. He's a lefty. Do you think there's a preference there at all?
Yeah, I don't think there's a preference. I just think they're looking for the most effective arm that they can get and a guy with closing experience. So I have a story up on PressOfAC.com where I take a look at some candidates who they can trade for. Boy, obviously Mason Miller is a very attractive guy. He'd be number one on my list. He's probably number one on everybody else's list. The other closers that are out there, your Tanner Scott, your Michael Kopech's, your Kyle Finnegans. Boy, those guys are okay, but I don't know if I feel great about those guys coming in to close the game out in, game 3 of the division series. So, they need some bullpen help. I'll be very interested to see what they do. Obviously, to me, Mason Miller, I have a lot of confidence in him, but do any of us feel comfortable if it's, Phillies 2, Braves 1, game 3 of the NLDS, and there's Kyle Finnegan jogging in from center field? I don't know about that. So, it'll be interesting to see what the Phillies do.
Press of Valencia's Mike McGarry joining us for a couple more here on 97.3 ESPN. Josh Hennig and Nick Earnshaw filling in for Mike Gill here on the Monday edition of the Sports Bash. Mike, if I could switch it up on you a little bit, interesting weekend. Apparently, Joel Embiid is doing interviews with anyone who will talk to him as part of Team USA. Meanwhile, Team USA barely beat South Sudan. What is going on in the basketball world? This is supposed to be like a slow time for basketball, but yet Team USA is struggling to beat a country that I think half of our audience had no idea even existed. Meanwhile, Joel Embiid seems to be, he's talking with the New York Times, he's talking with ESPN Radio, he's talking with FS1. It's like they're putting out Joel to do all the talking for the team.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because I have watched some of these games, basically, and you are right. I think South Sudan has only been a country for less than 20 years, basically. So, and obviously they took Team USA right to the wire on, I guess that was Saturday. I just have a question for you guys. What do you think Joel Embiid has been doing since the Sixers lost to the Knicks? It doesn't look like he's been actually, doing some sprints or training. The guy looks woefully out of shape. And if you're a fan of the Philadelphia 76ers or you're the Philadelphia 76ers, right now, and you look at him and how he's playing and how he looks out there right now, I'd be a bit alarmed. I mean, here's a guy to me to really maximize his effectiveness and really lessen his potential for injury. He's a guy that's got to get really skinny and sort of lose weight, and he looks heavier and slower than ever in these games right now. So, I would be a little concerned if I was the Philadelphia 76ers, but by what I've seen of Joel Embiid, because he certainly doesn't look like, he's been in the gym a lot since the Sixers lost to the Knicks in the playoffs.
By the way, I will note it was 2011 that South Sudan officially declared its independence. So it's actually a little less than you thought, Mike.
Right. Well, there you go. They got some players, though. I tell you what, they're
coached by Royal Ivey, former Sixer.
Exactly. And I believe it's a team built by Luol Deng, the former who played high school basketball in New Jersey and then went on to play for the Chicago Bulls and everything. So, yeah, I mean, look, these international games, I love the international basketball. I love watching the Olympic basketball. And sometimes you forget, like you just said, how good. Everybody's like, oh, South Sudan, this and that. They're NBA players and top college players on that roster. Having said that, should they still, only lose the United States by 1? Well, the United States was down, I think, 18 at the half. And came back in the second half and were actually up, 5 or 6 with about a minute to play. So, it's always, hard to remember that there's a lot of talent, around the world, and it's just not in the United States anymore. But my biggest takeaway is, boy, I would like to have seen Joel Embiid in shape and ready to go. And boy, he looks neither right now.
Josh, Mike, I mean, you guys are omitting here. Mariel Shayok is on South Sudan. He was a former 76er. That guy had 24 points in that game on Saturday.
Maybe they should have kept him.
Yeah, maybe.
Every time I watch a basketball game, there's a guy out there that the Sixers had, and I say to myself, well, why didn't the Sixers keep this guy? Like Drew Holiday. Why did the Sixers get rid of him? I mean, T.J. McConnell, why did the Sixers get rid of him? Isaiah Joe, why did the Sixers get rid of him? There's a lot of guys out there that seem to be playing for teams in key spots that at one point were on the Sixers, and the Sixers just turned around and said goodbye to.
Yeah, Shayok, a Delaware Blue Coat legend. But I want to ask you about
Embiid.
Absolute legend, yeah. With Embiid, I got to mention here, there was a New York Times article that came out. He did an interview there. He talked about the Philly fans and wanting to end his career there. Do you think there was anything interesting from that article? He talked about being depressed after the injury. Was there any takeaways from that you had, Mike?
Well, that's the article where he said that he could have been the greatest of all time if it's not for the injuries. But, I just think it kind of showed where Joel Embiid's head is a little bit, and kind of, to me, how he has a little bit of a misperception. First of all, durability is, in order to be one of the greatest of all times, you have to be durable. So it's kind of like saying, I would have been one of the greatest of all times, except I couldn't shoot. Well, durability is a skill. And look at LeBron James is the number one example. LeBron James is the second or third best player of all time. At his height, I don't think he was as good as Michael Jordan, but LeBron's durability almost pushes him up the list. He's 40 years old and still playing, outstanding basketball. So durability is part of what makes the athlete great. And for Embiid to even say the greatest of all time, I mean, if you're going to list the greatest centers of all time, if he's healthy, is he in the top 5 of the greatest centers of all time? I mean, this is a guy that hasn't, been past the second round of the playoffs. So I just I'm very perplexed by Joel Embiid, both how he's looked on the court and his comments off the court. I just find him perplexing at this point.
He's Mike McGarry from the Press of Atlantic City. Follow him on Twitter, X at ACPressMcGarry. Check out all of his coverage of not just Philadelphia sports, but South Jersey high school sports during the high school season at pressofatlanticcity.com. Mike, appreciate you jumping on, and when you're joining us again on Wednesday, Mike Gill will be back.
Well, I'll come extra sharp then. I'll have an extra Diet Coke before I pick up the phone. There you go.
Good stuff. Mike McGarry joining us here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN FM, 97.3 ESPN mobile app, powered by First Bank of Seattle City. And speaking of Mike Gill, don't forget, this Friday is the first stop of the Happy Hour Friday tour of the Sports Bash, and Mike Gill will be celebrating 15 years at Giuliano's in Egg Harbor Township. That's Ocean Heights Avenue is where you want to be for Happy Hour Friday. This Friday, July 26th, where 97.3 ESPN and Miller Lite want to celebrate with you. So come out and join Mike Gill, celebrate 15 years of the Sports Bash this Friday, July 26th, from 2 to 6 p.m. at Giuliano's in Egg Harbor Township with Mike Gill and the Sports Bash, 97.3 ESPN.
Drive into summer with the Honda CR-V and Accord, your fun-to-drive weekend getaway vehicles. From Honda, the 2024 Kelley Blue Book's KBB.com Best Value brand. So hurry in to the Honda Summer Event. For a limited time, well-qualified buyers can get a 2.9% APR on a 2025 CRV or 2024 Accord.
See dealer for financing details based on 2024 Consumer Choice Awards from Kelley Blue Book. Visit kbb.com for more information.
The Sports Bash with Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
He's Nick Earnshaw. I'm Josh Hennig, filling in for Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN. More Phillies talk still to come. Bob Wankel from Crossing Broad will join us coming up here on the Sports Bash. Before you mentioned, we'll get some of the Joel Embiid audio later in the show. But I got to tell you, Nick, I'm not a fan of Joel Embiid doing all this talking. I'm with McGarry on this.
Yeah, I don't love him going out and doing all these interviews. He has had some blowback from the French because he didn't play for their team. He's made some comments about Team USA. That was an in-depth interview, Josh, that they got into some things about the Sixers and what they've done over the past couple years.
I just want to know, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, you're good.
Why is Joel Embiid so intent on talking to everyone who are not the people who have covered him for the last several years?
I don't know.
We have people who cover this team day in and day out. Keith Pompey, right? Austin Krell, our Sixers insider. Paul Hudrick, Liberty Ballers. Devon Givens does a great job covering Sixers for years, right? These guys would be as insightful and understanding in their questions as anyone. But Joel Embiid is willing to talk to the New York Times and the Fox Sports and the Malika Andrews. What am I missing here?
I don't know. And the GOAT conversation, very interesting. I don't know what that was all about, too. Just keep it to yourself, Joel, some of the things.
Yeah, it's very bizarre. We'll get into it a little bit later in the show. But coming up next, back to the Phillies conversation. Stay of the Phillies with Bob Wankel next. He's Nick Earnshaw. I'm Josh Hennig. This is the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN.
This is the Sports Bash with Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app. Now live from inside the Ocean Casino Resort Studio, here's Mike Gill.
Josh Hennig along with Nick Earnshaw filling in for Mike Gill here on the Sports Bash. One more day here on 97.3 ESPN. 3 o'clock hour of the Sports Bash being brought to you by Broadleys Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning. Broadleys is your trusted source for heating, air conditioning, and plumbing service and installation for generations. Call them at 609-390-3907 or visit them online at broadleys.net. The Phillies might need some servicing after that weekend. I mean, they looked like they were jet-lagged or hungover or senioritis or something Friday and Saturday. And then all of a sudden on Sunday, happy day, the Phillies decide to wake up, smell the coffee, and play some baseball.
Let Tyler Phillips cook, Josh. He was cooking yesterday. 6 innings, no runs. I mean, hey, potential fifth starter? Maybe.
We asked Bob Wankel that on Friday, and he is back with us today here on 97.3 ESPN. Bob, welcome back in. How you doing today?
I'm all right. Good to talk to you. I feel like we just did this, but a lot has happened in between, so I'm glad to be back.
So let's get to some of that. Nick mentioned Tyler Phillips. The Phillies have only won 2 of their last 6 games, and Tyler Phillips started both of them. Is that just a coincidence, Bob? Do we read more into that? What is your take on Tyler Phillips being the only winning Phillies pitcher recently?
Just the way you draw it up, right?
We all predicted this on the bingo card all along, right?
It's not good, obviously, but it's also a pleasant surprise at the same time that he was able to turn in the start that he did yesterday. And obviously, it took a little bit of time for that offense to get going. They capitalized on a mistake by O'Neal Cruz, and good for them. But, really, Tyler Phillips had to be that good in the early innings to even put them in a position to win. And so we talk about what are they going to do with the number 5 spot in the rotation, what happens if they do expand to a 6-man at some point. He's at least giving them something to think about. Much the way I wouldn't want to overreact after 2 starts, I'm not going to overreact after 3. But you string enough of these together, and it makes you think, okay, maybe they have something here it's a little bit more than what you would have initially anticipated. We'll see.
Bob, when you think about this pitching staff moving forward, look, we know these guys are good, right? But do we read anything into the fact that Suarez is pitching tonight and Wheeler is pitching Tuesday because they both had this back strain, tightness issue, kind of very almost like borderline hockey description with the injury? Like, do we read anything into why one guy is starting one day or the other, or is that just a traditional, hey, we're Philly fans, we're just going to dig too deep into something we don't need to?
It could be a little bit of that. I mean, I think when you look at the two injuries, were they more concerned about Zach Wheeler's? Probably. I don't know that it really makes a difference. They're both starting in this series. It's a day apart. So I don't know that I would read a whole lot into it. But I'll tell you what, I mean, as far as Ranger Suarez goes and the anxiety over his recent performance, they could really use a good start from him tonight, and he has quite a test ahead of him. The Twins have hit very well over the last 2 months, and in fact, they've been outstanding against left-handed pitching this season. They have the best average from a team standpoint in baseball against lefties. They're second in slugging, second in OPS. So this is going to be a heck of a test for Ranger Suarez tonight, and if he passes it, then I think we can all take a deep breath and say, all right, that's the guy we expected to see here. And if he struggles, then all of a sudden you're talking about 5-6 starts in a row where you're not feeling great about that. And I think you can dismiss it when it's 1 or 2 starts. If it builds to a handful consecutively, you start to, I think it's fair to have a little bit of anxiety over it.
Hey, Bob, I got to talk about Jose Alvarado. Struggled mightily on Friday. He's got a 9.95 ERA here in the month of July. He had a lower leverage situation yesterday. He comes in the ball game. Do you think Rob Thompson's going to go to him in those type of situations rather than the 8th, 9th inning in the big at-bats? Maybe you throw in Gregory Soto as a lefty instead to just try and get his confidence back a little bit?
A little bit. I was surprised on Friday night that he got the 9th inning, the way that he's pitched during the month of July. And I really even feel like it dates back to the London series, that Sunday game where they let it slip away. He actually had, I believe, 6 of his next 7 appearances were still scoreless, but you just didn't feel like he was as crisp. And then you got to July here, and it's really started to unravel on him a little bit. And for that reason, 1-run game, I said, really, they're going to him in the 9th inning, especially the way that Matt Strom's pitched. He didn't come into that game on Friday. And I guess what the Phillies thought was, yeah, look, he has struggled, but he's such an important piece of what we're doing. Let's see if the All-Star break resets him and gets him right. And so they went to him, and it didn't reset him, and it didn't get him right. And I think that game was sort of like the line in the sand where they said, okay, we're going to have to dial it back here a little bit now. We're going to have to use him in lower leverage spots. And he comes in yesterday. They're up by a handful of runs. Game's not in jeopardy. Gives up a hit right away, but gets 2 strikeouts, throws a decent inning. I think that they have to build him back up a little bit and let him work through this. Obviously, sometimes the situation necessitates that you go to a guy in a spot where you'd rather not. And I don't think that they would avoid him at all costs in a higher leverage spot, but I do think they will probably take their time throwing him back into the fire.
Talking with Bob Wankel from Crossing Broad. Also, Crossed Up is the podcast. Joining us here on the Sports Bash, Josh Henning, Nick Earnshaw, filling in for Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN. So then, all that being said, Bob, does the Alvarado relegation, we'll call it, does that make the need to acquire another bullpen arm that much more important now?
Yeah, I mean, I think that if everybody was firing on all cylinders, you'd say, they don't need any bullpen help. But, Jose Alvarado has struggled. Ryan Kerkering did not have a real clean appearance on Friday night either. I think he kind of was the one that sort of put that game in jeopardy as it progressed. And, I think he's overall been pretty good, but he wasn't particularly great the other night. Matt Strom has had a couple hiccups here and there lately. I don't think that there's any reason to say, like, okay, they can't win a World Series or they can't make a playoff run with this current bullpen construction, but would they be better served by adding to it? I think so. And I think you do need to protect yourself a little bit with some of the uncertainty from Jose Alvarado specifically. So does that put a guy like Tanner Scott back in play? It could. Again, my thought all along is if you're going to go out and add to the bullpen, though, it better be a guy of consequence. It better be a guy that you can hand the ball to in a pressure spot late in the game, 1-run lead, and say, go get me this out. Because if it's not that guy, then why do it? I don't think you want one of those fringe guys. I think you need a guy.
Bob, Josh and I were talking about Christian Pache a little bit earlier, and he's been getting a lot of opportunities lately. Do you think it has anything to do with the trade deadline? And if so, does he have any value at the deadline? We talked about Mickey Moniak getting traded a few years back, where you didn't think you would get a lot for him. Is Christian Pache in that type of situation here?
Maybe. I mean, look, he had a couple of decent at-bats yesterday, and over his last 30 games, he has not been very good, to be honest with you. He's hitting sub 200, but he's a good defensive player, and he does work decent at-bats. Like, I just feel like he finds himself in deep counts and then can't finish. Like, you see him kind of work a pitcher, has an idea, and then it sort of falls apart late in the at-bat. I think it could be a little bit of a showcase thing. I would not be surprised if he was not here, post-trade deadline. I think that there's a world where they either move him or they simply DFA him in order to upgrade the spot, especially if Johan Rojas is going to be a part of this thing. Those two players have been somewhat redundant from the jump. And I think that you carry them because you can, and you're 25 plus games over 500, and it's fine. There's not a lot of pressure to figure it out, but I think that this is sort of the time where they're going to have to make a decision there. So, yeah, it could be a little bit of that.
Just to jump in there, Bob, because you mentioned about Rojas, it makes the Pache starting in center field on Friday worse when Rojas has two great plays in center field on Saturday. Like, I was out watching the game, Bob, and people were like oohing and ahhing over Rojas at the establishment I was at. And I'm looking around, I'm like, these people are like looking like, ooh, look at Rojas, and it's like, there's never a moment when people feel that way about Pache. And it's like, I don't understand why this organization, like you said, they have two guys who are redundant, right? They have two guys who basically are the same player, but I think we can all agree that Rojas is the higher ceiling. He's the guy who's got more potential at this point. So, why is Pache starting on Friday and then for Rojas to come out on Saturday?
Yeah, I mean, look, Johan Rojas, I've talked about him on the show quite a bit. I'm not a real true believer in his offensive game at the moment. He's probably been about what everybody expected him to be. I would say he's fallen short of expectations, as modest as they are, but I don't think he's necessarily exceeded them either. But I would agree with you that long term, he certainly is the higher ceiling player. So is it a showcase thing? I don't know. I think when they started the season with both players, the way they viewed it, though, was that Pache was maybe a lower ceiling but a higher floor guy. And so while redundant and somewhat similar in several ways, I think they felt like, wow, if Johan Rojas is a disaster, at least we have a decent option that we can plug in there, let him hit at the bottom of the order, and we'll survive it. But like I said, I think that things change, and obviously there's decisions to be made here, and you have to start optimizing the fringes of your roster as you get ready for a postseason run. And they're at that point now. Christian Pache has not done enough to warrant consistent playing time, certainly. And I don't think he's done enough to really warrant consideration as they build towards October. So I think that's where they're at with this right now.
You mentioned the lineup. I want to get your thoughts on how this lineup is constructed. Because I think they're never going to change the top four, Bob. I think we all can agree that the Schwarber, Turner, Harper, Bohm, those guys they're set, right? But is there any maybe thought that, hey, if we go out and get somebody, right? If we get like a platoon guy with Marsh or whoever we end up with, could that maybe impact the rest of this lineup? Because Stott has had, one good game in the last 2 weeks? Castellanos is Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Real Muto just coming back from an injury. Like, it's not like the rest of this lineup has, bang the door down and be like, we're great. We deserve to be in this spot in the lineup.
Yeah, well, I mean, Nick Castellanos has helped things here considerably. I mean, over the last 30 games, he is hitting over 300, and his OPS is north of 850. So he's actually back up over 7. He's at a 702 OPS after that home run at the end of yesterday's game. First time he's been there since March 31st. So he actually has sort of solidified his game a little bit. So I think that you have Schwarber, Turner, Harper, Bohm. I think they like Castellanos the way he's going right now in that 5 spot. If you're facing a right-handed pitcher, I think you're still comfortable with that. Marsh probably hits 6. It's that 7, 8, 9 that they sort of have to iron out a little bit. And a lot of the uncertainty ties into, as you mentioned, Bryson Stott, who over the last 30 games has been basically a 200 hitter. He just has not provided anything to them. A lot of weak contact, a lot of lazy fly balls to the opposite field. And they sort of have to figure that part of it out. So if you come in and you get another outfield piece, then that probably shuffles the way that you deal with the back end of the second part of your lineup. We'll see, right? I mean, but Bryson Stott has been just, he's really made this difficult. He's changed the way I think that the bottom half of the lineup is viewed because of his struggles. And they've reached a point. I thought the most interesting thing all weekend was that you saw Edmundo Sosa play second base 2 times. I mean, you talk about the first half that he had, and, you know, Bryce Harper mentions it during the All-Star game, like, oh, it would have been better if the other guy was here too, referencing Bryson Stott and how he wasn't part of that infield, that All-Star infield mix for the National League. So here you are. Let's start the tone, or set the tone, get out the gate fast in the second half. And he's sitting against Martin Perez in favor of Edmundo Sosa, a marginal left-handed pitcher. To me, like, that's pretty telling. And then he doesn't start against Marco Gonzalez. Like, I think that that's very telling about how the Phillies view Bryson Stott in this moment. And it was not a real vote of confidence, in my opinion.
Bob, with the struggles with Stott, the struggles with Alvarado, the offense, we've talked about it ad nauseum. Like, they want to go after a right-handed bat into the outfield, and now Alvarado taking a step back. How has that kind of changed, do you think, their approach heading into the trade deadline that's only about a week away?
I think that they have enough ammo to kind of do the 2 things that they want to do. Right. And I think that the 2 things they want to do are add to the bullpen and bring in a bat that can handle left-handed pitching. And again, like, it probably ends up being, I'll give you the name that I like at the moment, because I don't think it's going to cost you a ton, but I could see a guy like Lane Thomas being that player. But I think that you have enough ability to do both. And I think that the Phillies should feel, and I would be surprised if they didn't, felt enough urgency to go out and do both of these things. I really do think that there's a clear expectation about winning the World Series here, being well positioned to do it, and knowing that you're probably a piece or 2 short right now of putting yourself in the best position possible to do it. So I don't think you have to go all in and be crazy in terms of what you're willing to give up to get players like that in return. And so I think that they'll take a measured approach to it. But of the 2 players who ends up being more notable, probably the reliever, I'm guessing at this point.
Yeah, but Bob, that's the thing I'm trying to wrap my head around, because I've been bringing this up. You know, Dombrowski got Steven Pearce in 2018 for the Red Sox, and it wasn't Rafael Devers, it wasn't Xander Bogaerts, it wasn't Jackie Bradley Jr., it wasn't Mookie Betts. It was Steven bleeping Pearce, who was the World Series MVP. So it's like, you know, Philly's history is also full of randos having moments. So, like, I mean, for all I know, whoever Dombrowski acquires the deadline, he could be NLCS MVP for all I know. So, I mean, you know, this might be a more important move than maybe we're letting on.
Yeah, and I mean, look, you take a player like Lane Thomas and you say, oh, he's hitting 246. Who cares? He's hitting 246 on the Washington Nationals. Am I supposed to get excited about that? But then you imagine a world where, okay, you pair him up with a Brandon Marsh and you see that he's hitting over 300 against lefties.
Yeah.
You know, the OPS is north of 900. And then you put Marsh, what he brings to the table against righties, and Thomas on the flip of it, and you're like, well, damn, that's a pretty nice player I've got there all of a sudden. And also, if you have more problems with Johan Rojas, or he goes ice cold and goes to, you know, to be borderline unplayable offensively, you still have the ability then to slide Marsh over to center field and perhaps play both Thomas and Marsh together. Or again, it doesn't have to be Thomas specifically, but a player that sort of fits that profile. You can still make a big time impact without being a big name.
Bob Wankel from Crossing brought a couple more for him here on the Sports Bash. Josh Hennig and Nick Earnshaw filling in for Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN. Bob_Wankel on the Twitter X platform. Bob, we mentioned about Tyler Phillips. So any new insider thoughts on Taijuan Walker and Spencer Turnbull? Because at some point, I'm assuming those guys will be back in, the next couple weeks?
Maybe.
Okay, great.
Maybe. Let me just say this. No outcome with Taijuan Walker would surprise me. Like, there's just been this feeling all year of, like, where does he fit? And, you know, I guess the way that Phillips has thrown the ball has alleviated some of that concern about needing to get him back or even wanting to get him back. I mean, if someone came to the Phillies and said, look, we will take him and you must assume the bulk of salary, would they think about it? And you can always use starting pitching depth. They need starting pitching depth. We're talking about the possibility of maybe transitioning to a 6-man rotation at some point. You would think if they did that, Taijuan Walker would fit those plans. I just don't know. Like, I'm not absolutely certain that he does, though. And I just wonder if they decide, hey, look, this isn't going to work out here. Let's explore a way to maybe expedite that process a little bit. That being said, I mean, Phillips has been very impressive. I mentioned it on Friday. Like, the minor league stats don't really blow you away or anything, and you kind of think at some point he's going to be more like that guy. But one thing I give him a lot of credit for is he's not scared. He's willing to attack. He's in the strike zone a lot, doesn't issue walks. And so just from the ability to kind of be poised and execute at the level he has thus far this early in his career, it's very impressive. So, I mean, they should let him try to at least build on that for the short term.
Bob, the team that's trailing the Phillies in the division, the Atlanta Braves, go out and make a move today. They bring in Whit Merrifield. I had to ask you about it. Ozzie Albies' replacement. What does that tell you about where Atlanta's at this moment?
Yeah, no-hit Whit, as he's known in my circles. I have a couple group messages that refer to him as such. Look, man, I mean, the Braves are desperate, and it's not a terrible idea. I mean, you're talking about a veteran guy who everyone's very quick to point out that he was an all-star last year, and he can do a lot of things for you, and he can run, and he can play defense in multiple positions, and so there's always going to be some value in a player like that. And if you're the Braves, you kind of just hope that a deep breath and a reset and a change of scenery gets him going. He has a track record, and is it insane to think that for 3 months he can be the player that he was for the bulk of his career? No, but is it somewhat desperate? Yeah, of course it is.
Oh, it's definitely desperate. Listen, your car broke down, you're running out of options, what's going to replace it, and you go to the rental lot, and you can take a Pinto or a Honda Civic. What you going to choose? Well, you're probably going to take the Honda Civic if you're smart. So that's what Merrifield is right now. He's a 2000 Honda Civic. That's not even a stick shift. It's not even fun to drive.
I know that everybody has a lot of fear that that's going to come back to haunt them. I don't want to be on freezing cold takes or anything like that, so I'm not going to put the audio out there to have it clipped, but I guess I wouldn't be overly worried about it.
Yeah, exactly. He's Bob Wankel. It's the Crossed Up is the podcast. Like and subscribe wherever you get your podcast at Bob_Wankel on the Twitter X platform, and check out all his Phillies coverage at crossingbroad.com. Bob, great stuff today. We'll talk soon.
All right, talk soon, guys.
Great stuff from Bob Wankel here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. I'm Josh Hennick. He's Nick Earnshaw filling in for Mike Gill. We'll check back in on the text board coming up on the other side. 609-403-0973. Your DMs into 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Seattle. Elroy in Mays Landing. Cole from LBI. Get to you guys and more coming up next on 97.3 ESPN.
You're listening.
Drive into summer with the Honda CR-V and Accord, your fun-to-drive weekend getaway vehicles. From Honda, the 2024 Kelley Blue Book's KBB.com Best Value brand. So hurry in to the Honda Summer Event. For a limited time, well-qualified buyers can get a 2.9% APR on a 2025 CR-V or 2024 Accord.
See dealer for financing details based on 2024 Consumer Choice Awards from Kelley Blue Book. Visit KBB.com for more information.
With Mike Gill.
Never thought this radio stunt would catch on so big.
On 97.3 ESPN.
Josh Hennick filling in for Mike Gill alongside Nick Earnshaw here on 97.3 ESPN FM, 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank. Yeah, don't forget the boxing event of the summer is this Friday, July 26th, when Boxing Insider Promotions brings another action-packed fight card to Tropicana Atlantic City Showroom. Undefeated junior middleweight Justin Figueroa from Atlantic City will be back in action, along with Apps Academy High School's Bruce Selden Jr. and top-ranked heavyweight Otto Wallen will all be in action this Friday, July 26th, inside Tropicana Atlantic City Showroom. Tickets on sale now at Ticketmaster.com. You have a small window to get tickets this week on 97.3 ESPN. I will have Justin Figueroa in studio with me tomorrow, actually, for game night on 97.3 ESPN. And You can win some tickets tomorrow, some tickets this week with the Sports Bash. There's a limited supply, Nick, of tickets we're giving away. So if you don't get the tickets this week, the pairs that we're giving away, Ticketmaster.com is where you get your tickets for this Friday's boxing event of the summer. Don't forget, you can join 97.3 ESPN. Come out and watch the fights. Bruce Seldon Jr., Justin Figueroa, Otto Whalen, and much more this Friday night.
Do not miss it, Josh. That's all I'm going to say. Do not miss it, and do not miss your chance to win some free tickets. I mean, you can't. It's nothing better than that.
Now, I will say that you will be missing it because you made birthday plans before this fight card ever came together.
Oh, months ago.
Yeah,
months
so
ago.
you were planning your birthday back around like March Madness, basically.
I was. Yeah, I had this all planned out.
Yeah, so I mean, it's not your fault. You're like Aaron Rodgers. You made plans to do stuff way before other people set their schedules. It's not your fault.
Yeah, before training camp, I already had plans. It's like it's essentially the same thing here. I mean, but listen, it's good plans. I'll be, at the Phillies game. So I mean, hey.
I'm not blaming you. I'm just saying,
Guardians, Phils, can't miss it.
I mean, you won't be around for the boxing event that night. You won't be watching Deadpool versus Wolverine with me this weekend. You're just you.
You know where I'll be? I'll be in the nosebleeds.
Yeah, you'll be ghosting all of us for about 24 hours.
I'll be in the nosebleeds like I usually am, always in the nosebleeds, like I was during the Sixers season and Philly season. It's almost the same idea here.
Yeah, well, hopefully you don't lose because of it. So.
Yeah, I mean, I'm on a bad streak right now overall. Sixers, Phillies, it's not a good streak.
It's
turn
like
it around here.
It's like the book Dave Sherapan says on Billy Schweim's show. If we know Nick Earnshaw is going to the game, the idea is to bet the other way. So what you need to do, Nick, is you got to text Sherapan.
I will.
That, hey, man, before you go on Billy's show this weekend, you should know I will be in attendance Friday night for the Phillies game, just so you know.
Because it's a great matchup. The Guardians are one of the top teams in the AL. Like, that's a great matchup. If I'm in the building, I got to let Sherapan know because he's going to give me grief if I don't let him know. He told me last time. I got to let him know when I'm going to events because they're probably going to lose. And hopefully it's not the case this time. I'm trying to turn that around here.
By the way, did you see what the pitching matchup is?
I didn't look yet. No, I did not.
Christopher Sanchez versus former Phillies prospect Ben Lively.
Oh, wow. That's a matchup right there. How about that? Ben Lively. Who did they trade him for?
I have to pull that up.
I forget. I gotta look. I'll look it up. I'll look it up over here.
Well, let's see who gets it first.
Yeah. What are we racing? Producer racing here?
I guess. I don't know.
You probably got it on me. I already hear you typing. I didn't even get to open a new tab over here. I mean, you're already on the fly, Mr. Everything, Josh Henning.
So let me see here. Lively. He was actually in the Indians organization before the Phillies. I didn't know that. That's interesting. Let's see here. Lively.
Or did he leave on his own accord? I can't remember.
So Lively was not traded.
Okay.
He was picked up off waivers by the Royals. Then his contract was purchased by the Diamondbacks. Then he was released. Then he went to the Reds. Then he went to the Guardians. But the Guardians, the Cleveland organization, actually originally drafted him in 2010 before he was a part of the Marlon Byrd trade.
Wow, he's a part of the Marlon Byrd trade? That's crazy. I mean, this year he hasn't been bad. I mean, he's 8-6 with 3.57 ERA. I mean, he's been pretty well and pitched pretty well. And the Guardians have been a really good team. A little bit of a surprise, to say the least.
The Guardians are like the no-name defense kind of thing. It's like nobody knows who they are, but they're a bunch of good pitchers.
Yes, they have a ton of good pitching. Listen, you're going up against the Twins to start this week, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And then Friday, you start the series against the Guardians. So you're up against that AL Central, who I didn't really think it would be like a competitive division, but the Twins are second in the wild card right now behind the Yankees. Then you got the Yankees after the Guardians series. So the Phillies have a little bit of a gauntlet here against the AL to end July.
Yeah, Nick, it's on your job to let the locker room crew know that you are going to be in the house on Friday, which means everyone needs to bet against the Phillies.
Yes, I'm going to bet for the Phillies because I believe in my, my superstition here that it's going to break. It's going to totally break this weekend. I'm totally in favor of it breaking because it needs to happen, and I think it will happen. I'm on like an 0-for-6 right now in the last events I've attended in Philadelphia, sporting events, going back to the Sixers, Phillies overall. They haven't been winning games that I go to, it's going to change when we're in the nosebleeds again. Or we're going to bring back the positivity here, okay?
All right, well, let's get to the text board. 609-403-0973. Cole from LBI chimes in and says, I know you'll probably disagree, but the Phillies need to go out and get a number 2 starter. I think this lineup can mash. You have Rojas, the defensive specialist, and I know you have Wheeler, Suarez, and Nola, but Suarez looks like he has hit the wall, and I will forever think of Nola as no more than a high-end 3. Now, 2 questions I have with that from Cole from LBI. Number 1, who is the number 2 starter who you would get? Because I go back to my theory, because I was listening to Buster Olney on the Baseball Tonight podcast, Nick, and he said there's a lot of teams that are more desperate than the Phillies for pitching. He mentioned the Braves. He mentioned the Royals, the Yankees, the Twins. You can even throw the Red Sox in there if you want. So who can the Phillies get that the other teams might not be able to zero in on who would fit Cole from LBI's profile? Is my first question. My second question is, we mentioned about Walker and Turnbull earlier. How do they fit into all this? Like, would you pay another team to take on Walker's salary so you can get a number 2 starter? Like, how exactly would Cole's scenario work out here?
I'm not thrilled with Cole's scenario here. Okay, I think they have plenty of starting pitching. I mean, if you're going to go after Garrett Crochet or a Tarek Skubal, like, these are guys that are out there that would fit that profile.
I don't think the Tigers are trading Skubal.
Yeah, but I mean, he's out there. He's a name that they could go get some more prospects for. I don't know. It's kind of similar to the A situation.
I hate putting it this way, but I've already kind of resigned myself to the Crochet is being traded to the Dodgers.
Yeah, I think Crochet goes to the Dodgers. I can't see it happening. I mean, Tyler Anderson's another name that's out there. I don't know. I don't know why you'd want to go after another starter.
I mean, if the Rangers are selling, do you even think about Max Scherzer?
No, I don't think you got to worry about the starting pitching other than like the 5th starter right now. You have Zach Wheeler, Aaron Nola.
But if you needed starting pitching, would you?
If you needed
Scherzer?
it, sure, yeah. I don't think you have to go up a ton because of his age right now and the injury problems that he's had. But I don't think they need another starting pitcher right now. They have more pressing issues in the bullpen and the offensively.
If we were to take Cole from LBI's train of thought, let's say Ranger misses a month coming up or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, like if Rangers start tonight, he gets banged up again, right? And he has to go on the injured list, right? I'm just throwing out the scenario just to kind of go along with his thing. And
hypothetical.
Now your rotation is Wheeler, Nola, Sanchez, Phillips, and fill in the blank. You know, is a Max Scherzer a guy worth going out and saying, hey, Rangers, we'll give you Griff McGarry and you give us Max Scherzer?
I mean, that wouldn't hurt if you're giving up only Griff McGarry and another low-level prospect and maybe some cash. Sure, why not? Go out and you can never have enough pitching.
I mean, you could literally pay the Rangers to take Taijuan Walker off your hands.
Yes, exactly. But I think, stepping away from the fantasy land over there, I am. They don't need another starting pitcher. Like, we have seen what they've been able to do in the postseason. Wheeler, Nola, Rangers. I mean, you don't even really need to go to a 4-starter, but now you have Christopher Sanchez, who's taken a leap, who you can go to a 4-starter in the postseason. You're not going to have to worry about a 5th starter. Aaron Nola has been really good this year, and overall, the starting pitching staff is one of the best in baseball. It's in tops in the leagues, So I just can't. I don't agree with Cole's premise here in going out and getting a 2nd starter. I think Nola is a great 2. I don't think he's high-end 3. I think he's a great 2. I don't think he's necessarily an ace right now, but I think he's a fantastic 2nd starter in this rotation. So you don't need to go out and get another starting pitcher. Now, if you were injury prone and like Nola went down, Ranger went down, Sanchez went down, then it's like, all right, maybe we have to consider adding another arm here. But, I mean, they've been relatively healthy. They've pitched extremely well, been one of the best rotations in baseball. There's no need to add another starter. You got to focus on the bullpen and those high-leverage situations towards the end of the game to get guys out to win the ball game. You saw that fall apart last year with Craig Crumble. So, I mean, that's where they got to focus at if you're going to relegate it to pitching at the deadline.
Is that similar to is Tobias Harris and Craig Kimbrell hanging out together?
Yeah, it seems like they were best friends last year. I mean, Tobias Harris, he can go have his 25 points a game in Detroit. I mean, the most meaningless games that he would play against the Detroit Pistons, against the worst teams in basketball, he'd drop like 25 or 30 points and do absolutely nothing. Craig Crumble last year for the Phillies just totally ran out of gas. You need guys that are going to have some gas in October right here, Josh. I don't need another starting pitcher. I need guys at the back end here to win a game and save a game.
I have a buddy of mine. He hates Craig Kimbrell so much.
Craig Crumble. He's
he doesn't call him Craig Crumble.
Well,
he calls him something I can't say on the radio.
Well, that's fair too. I mean, to say the least, he fell apart last year for the Phillies. Now I know the bats went cold, but I mean he was part of it. I mean he could have.
He didn't help.
No, didn't help at all.
Elroy in Mays Landing chimes in on the text board at 609-403-0973. He says, would you say most Philly fans relish the underdog role of the last 2 years or this heavy favorite role this season and potentially what happened if they would bounce early? So this is kind of like the Sixers conversation,
yes.
Right? This is the Sixers are going to the playoffs as the top seed. They've lost in the second round. How do you handle that versus being the underdog team that makes a deep postseason run? I would say, though, I think that I just feel like Elroy and Mays Landing, this Phillies team is different. I just don't look at them as a front runner that loses early in the postseason. I think that they are a team that is going to at least make it to an NLCS, if not a World Series. I think that at the end of the day, no matter how rough the weekend was, you still had 62 wins for the All-Star break. You have a team that is a very good baseball team. And, Nick, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I just look at the Phillies and say, listen, they will add a couple pieces, and I think they will be fine for the postseason as long as they add the right couple pieces. Because as Bob Wankel just said about 20 minutes ago, if you were to acquire a guy like Lane Thomas, the combination of him and Brandon Marsh together makes a really darn good, complete player. So, you could argue that, if you had to face a team like the Atlanta Braves in the postseason, who have Chris Sale and Max Fried, if you're putting out Lane Thomas into that lineup instead of Brandon Marsh, you definitely feel a little differently, right? If you go out and get on a bullpen pitcher, I'm not saying it's going to be Mason Miller or Tyler Kopech, but, whoever it may be. I know someone last week mentioned Kyle Finnegan, for example, from the Nationals, but that's a guy out there. I think you mentioned Estevez from the Angels last week.
Yes,
if you get an Estevez or a Finnegan, you probably feel better about this bullpen. So I think that some of the questions Elroy and Mays Landing you're asking, I think will get answered because of the deadline.
Yeah, I think so too. And regarding the question about being the underdog, I mean, Philadelphia loves being the underdog, right? That's in our blood. But heading into this season, you wanted to win the division, right? It was like you've been in the wild card for 2 straight years. You wanted to win the division. And according to Bob Nightingale of USA Today, the Phillies are the favorite to win the World Series right now. Right. They are the top dogs at the moment to win the World Series. And when you're heading into a deadline, being the favorites to win the World Series, and you have clear holes in the outfield, in your lineup, at the back end of the bullpen, you're going to go improve. And Dombrowski's a savvy veteran executive. He's probably going to be in the Hall of Fame at some point when he hangs it up. But they're going to go out and they're going to add. There's no doubt in my mind they're going to add, and I think they're going to add an impact player. When you have a farm system that is improved like it has, you have the assets to do it. You're not going to have to make a ton of changes to your roster right at the moment. There's no doubt in my mind they're going to make a move, and they're going to get a bat, and they're going to get a relief pitcher, not a starting pitcher, but a relief pitcher, because you're thinking about those matchups in the postseason and in the playoffs, the end of the game, the high leverage situations. You want a guy throughout your lineup anywhere to be able to take the top off, hit a home run, get a base hit, draw a walk somewhere. You want a guy at the end of your back end of your bullpen to be able to get those big outs in those high leverage situations. So they're going to go out and make a move. There's no doubt in my mind. When you have a chance like this, the Phillies are great at almost every position with a couple little holes here, and they've been able to sustain where they're at with injuries happening, JT Realmuto going down, Trey Turner, etc. You got a real good shot to go far into the postseason, and you should take advantage and capitalize on it right now.
Stephen Ventnor chimes in, 609-403-0973. Now, I will preface this by saying Steve has sent 9 different texts. So, Steve, I cannot read on the air all 9 of your texts. So forgive me for encapsulating what you are saying. But Steve says there have been rumors about the Baltimore Orioles and the Phillies talking, and that the Orioles want a left-handed pitcher. So he asked, would you guys be willing to give up a Soto or Alvarado in a deal that could bring you back an Austin Hayes or Cedric Mullins?
Oh, absolutely not. Cedric Mullins has been awful this year. In his last 7 games, he's batting under 150, and overall he's batting around 214. The last time I checked, Cedric Mullins will not make this team better. You're still stuck with kind of the same problem you have with Rojas and Marsh. He's just another type of platoon guy. He has not been great for the Orioles. I don't even know if a change of scenery will do him great. He just hasn't been that good in Baltimore this year. They have so many prospects in Baltimore, they can just bring guys up and replace them. So that's why they're trying to move on from Cedric Mullins and add to the bullpen, because they've had injuries throughout their pitching staff, whether it's starting pitching or relief pitching.
I will say Austin Hayes is kind of a similar player to Lane Thomas, where he has hit very well against left-handed pitching. Maybe not as prolifically power-wise as Lane Thomas, but yeah, I think Hayes has over a 300 batting average against left-handed pitching.
But I wouldn't give up a guy in the bullpen for him. I wouldn't do that with where they're at. I mean, you're trying to add to your bullpen. So you're saying
that's too much?
I think it's too much. For Mullins, it's way too much, too. Mullins is not a player I'd go target. I know he's been brought up, and we talked about him on Friday.
I'm saying maybe Austin Hayes.
Austin Hayes, maybe, but I think you're trying to add to your bullpen, not subtract.
So the trade that Steve from Ventnor brought up, and let me make sure I got the right information here, because like I said, he sent a billion texts. He says, trade Alvarado and Pache for Austin Hayes and Jacob Webb.
So wait, say that again?
So Alvarado and Pache for Austin Hayes and Jacob Webb.
Why are we're trading Alvarado already? He had a couple of bad games. He had a bad month, and we're already trading him? No, I'm not giving up Alvarado right now. He's one of your guys. He's struggling right now. He's got an ERA right under 10 this month, but you want to give him an opportunity to build himself back up, like we talked about with Bob Wankel today. You give him an opportunity in the lower leverage situations to build himself back up. You're going to need that arm and that lefty in the playoffs. I'm not giving up Alvarado. I don't really want to give up anyone on the roster right now. You trade your prospects at this point.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of giving up the people in the big league roster.
Other than Pache.
Right, exactly. Pache is a waste of life.
Yeah. Oh man, that's brutal.
Yeah,
Wow.
I would say that if I was to go and get anyone, I have really leaned into the Lane Thomas idea.
I like that.
I don't mind Austin Hayes if I'm not giving up too much to get him. I probably like Lane Thomas a little better. It does give you a 93 Phillies vibe when you had, Jim Eisenreich and Milt Thompson and Pete Incaviglia and all those guys in the outfield. Maybe you say Incaviglia and Castellanos are similar, right? And, Marsh is a better fielding version of Eisenreich. And, maybe you could say that an Austin Hayes or a Lane Thompson would be maybe a little better hitting version of Milt Thompson. But, I wouldn't mind if that's the road you want to go down.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm just not a fan of. I'm with you. I do agree that you're not looking to dump guys in your bullpen right now.
No, not at all. Especially the guys like Alvarado, Hoffman, Strahm, all the Orion Kerkering. Those four you don't want to move at all right now. I know Alvarado struggled, but you still want to keep him on this roster. He's still a good pitcher. He'll get back to where he's been before, and you hope that's the case. You're not trying to subtract right now and give Rob Thompson less options at the end of a ball game. If you're going to move guys at the deadline, I wouldn't move any of those top flight relievers. I mean, they've been a really good bullpen throughout the majority of the year, so don't mess that up right now. Remember, they are the best team in baseball. They've had the best record. Only team coming out of the All-Star break with 60-plus wins. You don't have to go crazy here at the deadline and change a ton on your roster at the moment.
He's Nick Earnshaw. I'm Josh Hennick, filling for Mike Gill here on 97.3 ESPN. Coming up the other side, there was one name we did not mention that came in on the text board.
All right, let's hear it.
And it's the name that Nick Earnshaw does not want to hear mentioned in this conversation. But we will mention it next because the news came out about this player this weekend, and that's why an anonymous texter sent in a text, the 609-403 0973 here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN FM and a 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Seattle City.
StraighTalk.com. It's with Mike Gill
Do I have everybody's attention now?
on 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app.
Josh Henning alongside Nick Earnshaw, filling for Mike Gill on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. Nick, as promised, I wanted to get to a name that came in on the text board, and I know you're not gonna love this name.
I miss this name.
So an anonymous person texted in. I can't say who texted in because they didn't leave their name. But all they said was 2 words. Mike Trout.
Oh, no.
Mike Trout is scheduled to join the Salt Lake Bees for his rehab assignment tomorrow, and he is expected back at the big league level, according to reports, by this weekend, just in time for the trade deadline. So Nick, that the South Jersey Philly fan would love nothing more than a Mike Trout to Philadelphia trade.
Listen, I like Mike Trout. He's one of my favorite players growing up. No way, no how should the Phillies go after Mike Trout right now. There's absolutely no reason to go get Mike Trout. We don't know what his injury, if he's going to get hurt. He's had plenty of injuries. The contract scares me. Unless you're giving up Christian Pache, Josh, then you get Mike Trout.
I mean,
Other
you
than
might
that,
be giving up
no,
Pache.
No, I'm talking 1 for 1. Not a kicker. Not adding him in as a kicker part of the deal. No.
I mean, you've traded with the Angels before, why not again?
No, go get Estevez, the reliever.
What if you
Don't
get
get Mike
Estevez and Trout?
No,
What if part of
Estevez
the
only.
thing is we will take Taijuan Walker, but if you take Trout off our hands, but we'll give you Estevez if you give us Griff McGarry.
Yes, let's go get an injury-prone outfielder. Luis Robert, don't want him either. I don't want another injury-prone outfielder. Can't happen. No way, no how, Josh.
Nick Earnshaw hates Mike Trout.
That's just false.
Football at 4 coming on next with Jeff Mosher here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN.
97.3 ESPN presents the Sports Bash with Mike Gill. It's time for Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast.
Just hungry to bring back another Lombardi to Philly. The fans deserve it. Our team deserves it. Culture begs for it.
Now live, this is Football at 4.
It was over after that phone call, in my opinion.
As soon as he said to go hit the market,
I never, in my heart, truly believed that they were going to match it, or they only wanted me for a lower price. So, no matter what, I probably wasn't going to go back.
That's the sneak peek of Saquon Barkley. He will be the full interview dropping tomorrow on the Scoop City podcast, another podcast, Nick, I got to listen to.
It's another one you have to get to your list.
Yeah, Nick Earnshaw across from me. I'm Josh Hennick here in the Ocean Casino Resort Studios on 97.3 ESPN. Football at 4 on a Monday with Jeff Mosher joining us here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. Jeff, welcome back from the weekend. How you doing today?
I'm great, Josh. Thanks for having me. And listen, you don't need any other podcast for your Eagles info other than Inside the Birds. We got it all covered. You know that.
Well, cover this for me because Saquon's doing more interviews for the season starts, and he's basically insinuating that he always knew he was going to be leaving the Giants. Do you buy that?
Yeah. I mean, I think we even discussed this either last week or when the stuff came out from Hard Knocks, right? When they didn't reach a long-term agreement last year around this time, and then he wound up settling for that revised one-year deal, that was the writing on the wall. The Giants were not going to want to pay him more than they already offered, especially because last year it was an okay year for Saquon, but it wasn't a breakout blockbuster year by any stretch of the means. And as we had discussed, I know that the Eagles have used this tactic before to sort of play the public relations game where they've told a free agent, you go ahead and test the market and come back to us with what you got. And we'll either match it or say, God bless you for getting a great offer. But sometimes the organization just wants to be able to tell the public, hey, he got a great offer that we couldn't compete with. not really letting the public know that they never even made an offer. You were just told the guy to test the waters and let him take whatever contract was out there. It sticks out in my mind, Josh, that when they won their playoff game, was it against the Vikings 2 years ago before they played the Eagles, right?
Yes, it was the Vikings.
Upset?
Yep.
You can go fact check me on this. I'm pretty sure Saquon Barkley got 9 carries in that game. And then after that, when they played the Eagles, yes, they got blown out, but I'm fairly certain Saquon carried the ball 9 or fewer times and didn't get a whole lot of touches in that game as well. It seemed like the Giants were already starting to try to move away from being a run-heavy, Saquon-heavy team and into a more of a passing game with Daniel Jones, who had a decent year that year, but obviously last year things got messed up when Daniel Jones got hurt. But, you look at what the Giants' plans were, I don't think they ever had an intention of bringing him back.
By the way, you are correct that he had 9 rush attempts in both playoff games. He actually had a total of 11 touches versus the Eagles, 14 touches versus the Vikings. So, but Jeff, you just said something perplexing to me. You just said that they were already trying to phase out his role in their offense. And it's like, why would you want to phase out a guy who is arguably one of the best at his position? Like, you don't have to run the ball with him all the time. You can use him as a receiving weapon. You can use him in a multitude of ways. Like, are the Giants really that against having a running back be one of their best skill players?
Well, I think you have to look at the head coach, Brian Dable, the coordinator, Mike Kafka, the systems that both of those guys come from, Kansas City. Dable was with Buffalo before that. They were starting to open up the offense, and almost every offensive coordinator outside of maybe like Jim Harbaugh or even Greg Roman when he was with the Ravens, most offensive coordinators or head coaches with an offensive mindset want to throw the ball. They want to evolve their offense into an explosive pass game offense. And listen, I'm just the middleman here. I'm just the objective person giving you my viewpoint. Saquon had a great rookie year when the Giants were terrible and had nothing. I think he had over 2,000 combined yards. Then he got hurt, right? Second year was the ACL. I mean, he's been banged up quite a bit. And if you look at his yards per carry average since the first 2 years, they've gone down considerably. So is he one of the best at his position? Yes. Is the NFL blessed right now with 10 to 12 great running backs? Probably not, right? I mean, to be fair, it's not a great era for unbelievable running backs. I mean, it just isn't. And I probably have a negative tinge to me, and I'm not trying to be that way. I've always sort of looked at the Saquon signing with the Eagles somewhat skeptically because it's pretty out of character for Howie to spend big free agent money on a running back. But if you do look at the trajectory of Saquon Barkley's career, it started off first 2 years like a lot of running backs really good, but came back to earth, both statistically and obviously for health reasons as the years have gone on. And like I said, most offenses want to graduate from running the ball a lot to throwing the ball a lot.
Hey, Jeff, I want to stick with Saquon Barkley here and just kind of talk about how he's going to be involved in the offense this year. We've seen the Eagles not really utilize running backs in the passing game a ton over the past couple of years, or in a while, to say the least.
Right.
How much do you think they're going to get Saquon involved in the passing game, maybe line him up in the slot at times, throwing him out of the backfield screens and things of that nature? Do you think they're going to use him in that way?
You would think, based on what we saw at OTAs and what we know he can do as an athlete, as a ball catcher, yeah, you would think so. But to be honest with you, we had this sort of discussion about DeAndre Swift last year, right? And ironically, DeAndre Swift had the most carries and rushing yards of his career and the fewest receptions and receiving yards of his career. Now, you bring Kellen Moore into the equation. Kellen Moore had Tony Pollard doing great things, catching the ball 2 years ago. He also had last year Austin Eckler at times being able to catch the ball. So it is a part of the offense, but, I don't see Saquon Barkley the way like a Brian Westbrook type of player. I don't see him lining up and running routes really well. I think he's got good hands and can catch the ball leaking out of the backfield. But one of the fundamental issues they'll have on this, Nick, is that Saquon Barkley's pass pro is not great. It's okay. Not great. There was a myth when they signed him that this was going to be huge for their pass pro game because Saquon Barkley is a big guy, and I think people protect him. But both Adam and I have spoke to a lot of different people on this, and people who watch tape, people who've coached him in other places, and they've said, great guy, love him, smart guy. It's nothing like that. It's just he's not the best pass protector. So if you're going to put him out there to catch a lot of balls on third down, you're also going to have to then not telegraph everything. You're going to have to keep him in sometimes. But right now, Kenny Gainwell has been the guy for them that's been the better guy at blitz pickup and pass protection. So if you want to put him on the field more to catch passes, okay, but then you're taking away maybe a potential blocker in the blitz game and inviting a blitz, which is an area they struggled at last year.
Jeff Mosher joining us from the Inside the Birds podcast, InsideTheBirds.com. Joining us here on the Sports Bash, he's Nick Earnshaw. I'm Josh Hennig, filling in for Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN. You mentioned the offense, Jeff, and I want to touch on that again because you and I talked about this a little bit on Wednesday's show, and that is, Kellen Moore is the guy in charge now. And there's all kinds of articles that have been coming out, all kinds of interviews, whether it's Diana Rossini, what she said in The Athletic, whether it's Marcus Hayes in the Philadelphia Inquirer, whether it is 100 different people have talked about this. But I want to get to your reporting, Jeff, because you and Adam had this months ago about the whole dynamic of Nick Sirianni basically seceding the play calling. This is not new news. So why do you think this topic is, ramping up the way it is when this is something that you and Adam reported about months ago?
So I'm sorry, you're talking about the Saquon Barkley element of it? Why is that now all of a sudden?
No, the Kellen Moore being in charge of the offense and Sirianni seceding the play calling. This is something that you and Adam talked about months ago, but now all of a sudden, the last several days, it's become a new. It's almost like people are having like an epiphany about it.
Yeah, I think that's sort of the summer cycle, right, where the national media, you get closer to training camp and you want to seize upon the bigger storylines going into camp. And so you revisit angles that have already been touched on months prior, but because you're national media, it gets a little extra buzz to it, whether it's what you just, the Scoop City podcast or something Adam Schefter might say. But yeah, you're right. It is not new news that this will be Kellen Moore's offense, and Nick Sirianni has continued to say, hey, look, it's going to be his offense, and some of the things we did do well will be incorporated into it, I'm sure. But yeah, it's got to be a new offense because the head coach already admitted that the last one was stale. So when the head coach comes out and says it, it makes it easier for the reporters to say, see, we're not crazy. The head coach said it too.
Well, the coach said it. Jason Kelsey said it. Lane Johnson said it. Jalen Hurts implied it. Darius Slay implied it. Brandon Graham. Right. Like, everyone has said it implied this. Like, why are we acting like this is like, I don't know, Isaac Newton discovering gravity?
The same thing with the defense, Josh, because I know maybe it was only a week or two ago, Brandon Graham in an interview talked about on the defensive coaching staff. Someone said, what happened last year? Why was the defense so awful over the second half? They said, well, we didn't have the coaches putting players in the right spot, and it made all these headlines. And I'm like, why is this making headlines? This was the most obvious thing any Eagles fan or observer could tell you. And then on top of that, of course, we had it well in-depth reported, all the sort of power struggle there on defense and Sean Desai and the players having issues with it. And then going to Matt Patricia trying to run a scheme that isn't his. That was all, it's all chronicled. Not just on Inside the Birds, but yes, definitely on Inside the Birds.
Really quick, here's that Brandon Graham audio you're referring to, Jeff.
I didn't think we had all the right coaches in the proper spots that could help us, whatever Desai's message was, because it was just a bunch of miscommunication. That's all. That's what I would just say. It was just miscommunication that I know Howie regretted after the season.
Go ahead, Jeff. Follow up on that.
Yeah, I love Brandon, so I'm not making fun of him, but that is the what's the term? No est Sherlock. Oh man, yes, you definitely had coaches not in the right. You had a coach, Matt Patricia, running a scheme, a Fangio scheme when he had he had zero zero education in that scheme. I mean, I know he's a defensive coach and he's a smart guy and whatever, astrophysicist or whatever he is, but I mean, come on. Like, it was even before that, you had miscommunication because you had 4 different secondary coaches, and the Eagles did not know how to defend a bunch formation, guys wide open. It's just bad.
Jeff, I want to stay with the defense here a little bit, and I want to talk about the linebacking situation, specifically Nakobe Dean. Heading into this season, we know he's been injured a little bit, banged up, really hasn't gotten off to a great NFL start. Tell me how Vic Fangio views him heading into this season. How are the Eagles looking to utilize him this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think Vic Fangio, I can't tell you how he views him until we see how he deploys him on the practice field. What I can tell you is the Eagles, having invested a 3rd-round pick in him, want to see this thing work out, but they've also given themselves options in case it doesn't work out. That's why you're seeing a guy like Zach Bond getting some run, some tests, even though he's never really played inside linebacker. They think he may have the capability to do it. That's why Devin White was signed. That's why Oren Burks was signed as a veteran backup who's played, just played last year or 2 for the NFC champion 49ers. So they've given themselves options because the concern with Nakobe is his ability to stay healthy. He's been injured here in his first full year starting. He got banged up twice, 2 foot injuries, and they were major. And, we reported this on Inside the Birds, even though when they drafted him, even though I think he did not miss a game at Georgia, there were concerns about his durability because of his size and just some of the little nagging things that they had heard about him, a foot here, an elbow here, a toe here, things like that, enough that's why he was a 3rd-round pick. So, Adam and I had a little fun on the podcast that came out today. Like, we were trying to handicap who's going to start inside linebacker for the Eagles for the season opener. And I think we put Devin White at a -140 just based on the contract alone and the experience. We put Nakobe at -120 and Zach Bond at maybe a +225.
Yeah, it's funny though.
There's some good money there on a dark. If Zach Bond's good, there's some good dark horse money on that.
I like that.
I mean, it's good value. I won't deny that. I want to know though, because Jeff, you mentioned you guys reporting on the pod about how this is not the first time Howie has gone into an offseason with like an underwhelming linebacking situation and revamped it. We saw this for 2022. We saw this for 2017. Like this is the Howie, hey, this is one of my go-to moves. This is almost like the same as a basketball player having a spin move in his back pocket. Like this is the Howie move, right? This is his, hey, last year it didn't work. Let me just retool the linebackers based on what the coach says.
Yeah, and that's why I think there's more optionality here with, signing Devin White and Oren Burks, Ben Van Sumeren, who they put some time and effort into developing last year, trying Zach Bond there. You might even see, we'll see, because the big question mark, we'll see how they use Nolan Smith. Does he continue to get a couple of looks at that off-ball linebacker position like he did last spring and a little bit during the season? But the point I was making is how Howie reacts when he knows going into training camp that there are positions that lack depth. Last year, he knew that he went into camp with Nakobe Dean, who never started yet, right, and Nick Morrow replacing Marcus Epps and who's the other guy who went to Arizona? I can't remember his name right now. Marcus Epps and the other starting linebacker from the Super Bowl year. Help me out. I'm getting old.
Oh, I know it's like Kazir White. Kazir White. Yeah, Kazir White.
Kazir White. Right. So my point was, he knew going into the training camp last year that Nick Morrow, Nakobe Dean, and not much depth behind it may not be the answer. So as soon as Nakobe Dean stubbed his toe, he signed Zach Cunningham and Miles Jack, right? Not two random guys, like two guys who started a lot of NFL games. And Zach Cunningham wound up being a guy that they immediately looked at as a starting linebacker for them. It's almost as if Howie already had it in his mind going into camp that, give me like a week here, let me see what I got. He didn't make that move because Nakobe Dean bruise his ankle one day in a practice. He made that move because he saw what he had at the inside linebacker position and was already thinking about upgrading it going into camp, and then pulled the trigger as soon as he had a reason to. So I would apply that thinking now to safety and to number 3 wide receiver / slot receiver, and maybe even defensive tackle where they don't have much depth, where Howie probably has some names in mind here, and he's going to go to camp and he's going to let some competition play out. But, especially at safety where they're really, really short on bodies, let see what happens if Reed Blankenship stubs his toe, right? You might find 3 safeties in here the next day, just like they did last year at linebacker.
Justin Simmons is out there still.
Yeah, I think that's the popular name, but like I said, Zach Cunningham and Miles Jack were 1-year guys who were not going to get guaranteed contracts, right? You're probably looking more along the lines of that.
Jeff, before I let you go, I wanted to follow up, speaking of the defense, on something that we talked about with Adam on Friday's Football on 4, which was about the defensive tackles. Nick and I are going to joust a little bit later about who the top Philly athletes who are 25 and younger are. And, to me, 2 guys who are on the list have to be talked about are Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis. But a lot of that conversation is about their potential, not about what they actually have done. So, talk to them about the interior D-line, because you are having to replace a staple, which is Fletcher Cox, in 2 years after also Javon Hargrave leaving. And now you got not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 very young players, all at the D-tackle starting in reserve spots.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys heard Adam's fact in our podcast this morning, but this, it was mind-blowing. My eyes didn't fall out, but my ears almost fell off when I was hearing Adam say it. But the Eagles are the only NFL team not to have a vested veteran at defensive tackle. Yep. The Eagles of all teams, the team that has put the most, right? Like I could believe that about another organization, but not the Eagles. But yeah, that just shows you how razor thin they are, unless of course some of their young guys like Moro Ajomo or a Gabe Hall, who they got as a rookie free agent this year, really step up and turn into something. But that's one of those positions that I think that by the time we get to the season, there'll be a veteran name there, but we'll just have to wait and see. But yeah, I think to your point, Josh, I feel more comfortable about putting Jalen Carter on that list. I know he faded a little bit down the stretch, but there were just times where he played with such violence, controlled violence and such athleticism that the person who lined up across from him just had no shot, right? We just saw him just hand smack guards to the ground. That's just, you don't see that every day. Jordan Davis, to me, I think the concept of what Jordan Davis can be is more tantalizing than what he might actually wind up being. First and foremost, he has to stay in shape. He is right now, as far as his weight down. He has to keep his weight down, and then he has to get in football shape, meaning he's got to be able to play a significant stretch of the game. He's always going to rotate. That's fine. Defensive linemen do that. But he's got to be able to play steady rotations and not lose his technique as the game goes on, because he gets tired and exhausted. It's amazing how blockable a 360-pound guy is when he is tired, because he just plays high and gets pushed out of the way. So that's a big challenge for him. And then once, Josh, you get past that, then you've got to see, all right, well, you're a top 15 pick. They didn't draft you just to play the run. Eventually, you got to show that maybe you can push the pocket a little bit, become a part of the pass rush. So I feel like there's a lot of hurdles to clear for Jordan Davis to really become what the team envisioned when they drafted him, and they saw that athleticism that he showed at the combine and everything. That to me is a little bit further away from Jalen Carter, who I just think as long as he keeps his head on straight, takes the coaching, and goes out there and is conditioned to play more snaps, he's going to be a great player.
He's Jeff Mosher. Follow him on Twitter X at Jeff P. Mosher on Twitter, because we all know the P stands for Philadelphia. Jeff P. Mosher on the Twitter X platform. And check out the latest edition of the Inside the Podcast. Like and subscribe. Download wherever you get your podcast. And Jeff will be back on Wednesday when Mike Gill is back behind the mic here on 97.3 ESPN. Jeff, great stuff today. Appreciate you jumping on.
Thanks, Josh. That's actually the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me about the P standing for in my name, so I appreciate it. Take care, guys.
See you later. Jeff Mosher here on 97.3 ESPN. He's Nick Earnshaw. I'm Josh Hennick here on 97.3 ESPN. Coming up on the other side, today's edition of Nick's Nuggets will dig deeper into Joel Embiid doing an interview with the New York Times. What did Joel say, and what issue do we take with what he said or didn't say? Nick Earnshaw. Josh Hennig, Nick Earnshaw, filling in for Mike Gill. Here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN FM, the 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City.
What's the easiest choice you can make? Window instead of middle seat? Picking a vendor who sends a great gift basket? Outsourcing business tasks you hate? What about selling with Shopify? Whether you're selling a little or a lot, Shopify helps you do your thing, however you cha-ching. Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. From the launch your online shop stage to the first real-life store stage, all the way to the did we just hit 1 million orders stage. Shopify's there to help you grow. Whether you're selling scented soap or offering outdoor outfits, Shopify helps you sell. Wherever and whatever you're selling, Shopify's got you covered. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/try. Go to shopify.com/try now to grow your business, no matter what stage you're in. Shopify.com/try.
Mike Gill.
And I am the voice of the voiceless.
On 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app.
Josh Hennig along with Nick Earnshaw, filling in for Mike Gill here on 97.3 ESPN. Don't forget, this Friday, Mike Gill will begin his Happy Hour Friday tour. Giuliano's in Egg Harbor Township is where Mike Gill and the 97.3 road team will be at for Happy Hour Friday, celebrating 15 years of the Sports Bash. Check out Mike Gill and the team from 2 to 6 at Giuliano's on Ocean Heights Ave in Egg Harbor Township for your chance to win tickets to go see Green Day and Smashing Pumpkins. Nick Earnshaw.
I love Green Day. Smash Pumpkins got some decent songs too.
See,
I'm a big Green Day guy.
I'm glad you said that because I had this conversation with Mike. Now, for full disclosure, folks, Mike Gill is Gen X.
Yes.
I'm a millennial, and Nick Earnshaw is Gen Z.
I'm a Zoomer.
So it's interesting because I wrote an article last week about the artists that like boomers hate and like millennials hate and like how there's difference between the generations and like for example boomers hate Nick Jonas, for example.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I wrote in. So it's interesting that like you and I are like Green Day, Green Day, and Mike Gill's like, oh, I'm in for Smashing Pumpkins.
I'm in for Green Day for sure.
And it's not that I hate Smashing Pumpkins, but I feel like one of the problems, and I will get to Joel Embiid cuts in just a second, folks. And I know folks can chime in on this at 609-403-0973 in your DMs into the 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea Isle. Nick, I've always felt that for people in different generations, music has a different message and connection. You know what I mean? There is some music that is part of like how you grew up, like the household. For example, I grew up in a household where everything was one of 3 kinds of music. Everything in my family was like the Motown, Huff and Gamble, Elvis music. It was Christian church music, or it was, some amalgamation of like classic rock kind of music. That was my whole family. Okay.
Yeah.
So like for me, I have an affinity naturally for, one of the last surviving members of the Four Tops passed away today.
Okay.
The Duke, he passed away today. So, like, I listened to the Four Tops. I remember the Temptations as a kid, listening to James Brown. I watched Knight Rider as a kid. So, like, there's a lot of different music that I grew up with. But then as I got older, I come of age with certain music as well. My generation, for lack of a better term, we were 90s hip hop. It was Tupac, it was Biggie, then it was DMX, right? But then you had the whole post-grunge movement. You had your Linkin Park, and that's where kind of the Green Day fell into place. So, like, there's like a gap for me when it comes to music where it's like, for Mike Gill, the Smashing Pumpkins and, I'm trying to think of another group that he, Deftones for Mike Gill, that kind of music is really like in his age wheelhouse, whereas I'm about 8 years younger than Mike Gill.
Right.
So, like, for me, I hit junior high and high school in a completely different era of music, and I'm sure you did as well.
Yeah. Well, yeah, obviously. I'm a little younger than both of you. But, no, I mean, like, for when you're in, like, high school, middle school, that's kind of, like, where people identify their era of music and where they kind of find their favorite musicians, right? Like, that's kind of where the age starts of you're starting to listen to a bunch of different things. You kind of find what your taste is, and then that's kind of what you identify with, I should say.
Like, what
as
was
you
it
get
for
older.
you?
For me, it had to be like hip hop, right? Like, it was the Drakes, it was the Kendrick Lamar, Future, all those, the Migos. Like, that was Meek Mill, like all Dreams and Nightmares. Like, that was kind of my era where I started to get into it. I caught like the tail end of Eminem's career, Not Afraid, things of that nature. So that's kind of the area I was at. And then Green Day as well was like when I was like in elementary school, and like they were a band that I was into. Like, now I'm kind of into everything. I love rock, I love pop, I love rap. But like during my like high school years and my middle school years, that's kind of when I started identifying with those type of artists. Lil Uzi Vert's of the world. Drake, like all those names were kind of coming up. It was during the SoundCloud era. So like that's when I was starting to listen to all this new music, and it was when SoundCloud was kind of popping off a little bit. So that's kind of my era.
SoundCloud. Wow, that's a throwback. I appreciate you bringing up a little SoundCloud. That's a good job by you.
Yeah, that's kind of my era. Like when I was starting to get into music a little bit more, and that's kind of what I've identified with as I've gotten older, into my mid-20s now, Josh.
Yeah, you're so young. You young people.
I know. I can't. I've even started to evolve. I'm getting a little bit into country as well. Like I'm all over the place right now, Josh. Like rap, pop, rock, hip hop, whatever.
Nothing
country,
wrong with that.
I mean, because I was never a big country guy. Now I've turned into like a more of a country guy too. I mean, I think it has something to do with like Post Malone. Like I grew up with Post Malone too, another guy who was like a rapper. And now he's kind of evolved into a pop star, and now into a little bit of a country artist. So like I think that's kind of had something to do with it.
Yeah, I mean, I was never a big country person until I moved to South Jersey. I didn't really ever listen to country because when you're from Philadelphia, what the heck is country music? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Everything was only 3 genres in Philadelphia. I moved to South Jersey, and it was like, someone hands me the Linkin Park Hybrid Theory album. I'm like, what is this?
Yeah.
It was like having like an epiphany. But
and I've probably like aged how old I am, like with naming Drake and Kendrick Lamar is like who I've grown up with.
You don't think I just aged myself?
Like I show how young I am, I guess, with showing like those are my favorite artists growing up. That's who was popular. It's Taylor Swift too. You could throw her in there, but everyone knows Taylor Swift now. I mean, but I grew up with her essentially.
Yeah, I'm not going to get into this. We're not having that conversation.
You don't want to have that conversation?
No. I do want to respond to the one anonymous texter.
Yes.
They said Green Day was before Smashing Pumpkins.
Really?
Which is not exactly true. It's kind of true. Kind of. So the first Green Day album, I just double checked, came out April 1990. The first Smashing Pumpkins album debuted in May 91.
Okay.
So in the most literal sense, that is true. In the most literal sense. The problem is the first Green Day album that hit the top 10 of the charts was 1994 Dookie.
Yeah.
The first Smashing Pumpkins album that reached high on the charts was actually their 93 album, Demise Dream.
It's crazy.
Demise Dream. So while Green Day, sorry, real quick. So while Green Day came out with the first album. Smashing Pumpkins rose to popularity first.
So the first Green Day album I ever listened to was 21st Century Breakdown. And that came out in 2009. That's how I got introduced to Green Day. I just want to put that out there.
You got to go back and listen to the other stuff.
Remember, I'm 2000. I wasn't a 90s baby at all. I was 2000.
Listen, I always say people of your generation have no excuse to go back and listen to stuff.
I do listen to it. I love all the old
like
stuff.
the people
Brain
who are
Stew.
like, people are like, I don't know who Terry Bradshaw is. I'm like, it's called NFL Films.
It's called knowing your
YouTube.
history. Yeah,
just look it up.
Yeah, I respect my history. That's why, I'm a big Michael Jordan fan. I love going back and watching highlights of Michael Jordan, all the time. Like Last Dance, my favorite documentary of all time. But when it comes to music, I still go back. I listen to classic rock. And you talk about product of your environment, what you're listening to. Growing up, my dad always listened to Red Hot Chili Peppers. So I'm a big Red Hot Chili Peppers fan. I mean, that's what I beat Billy Schwein with on the locker room a couple of weeks ago when we were doing the generational music challenges. I picked the Red Hot Chili Peppers because they were like 90s, early 2000s. I had to beat them with the early 2000s stuff during the time period which I was alive. So Red Hot Chili Peppers are another band that was a little before me, but kind of around the same time I was starting to become, aware of things.
Aware of things. By the way, another person texted in that Green Day was before Deftones. It's not a literal what came first.
Right.
It's about how it was interwoven in your environment. Okay? Like you mentioned Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Yeah.
Not your generation necessarily, but you grew up with it.
Yes.
The reason why, for me, Green Day had a more of a relevance than Deftones, Smashing Pumpkins is because my environment. One of the things that gets misunderstood, I can't believe we're having this conversation on Monday on Sports Bash. Josh Hennig and Nick Earnshaw here on 97.3 ESPN. And no offense to Eddie from Ocean City, pulling a Josh on Josh, being literal. Yes, Green Day in the most literal sense was before Deftones.
Literally, Josh? Literally.
Literally.
Come on, Josh.
But Eddie knows it's not about what literally came first. It's about what was relevant to each generation. For people who are Generation X, okay, there is a bleed over into millennials, and millennials bleed into Generation X. There is a I'm not going to get into the exact ages, okay, because it's very confusing.
You don't want to be literal?
Generations.
Come on, be literal, Josh. That's your thing.
Look, man, I can't remember
literally
everything,
Josh.
okay?
You are literally Josh.
I literally am Josh, but I literally can't remember everything. But there was a very intense element when I was, I would say like 13 to 23. I'm going to use that range.
It's a long range.
Okay. Well, I'm using it on purpose. It's because there was a very intense, we grew up in that range. And anyone who went to school with me knows what I'm talking about, where it was very anti-establishment. It was us against the man. It was, bleep the man, bleep, authority figures.
Right.
And it wasn't as much, hating the police necessarily like it was like, with like Public Enemy and that rap.
Right.
But it was more like Rage Against the Machine.
Right.
Green Day. There was a very society is pushing us down. They don't respect us. They don't understand us. It's the reason why groups like Stained, for example, and Linkin Park, and I'm trying to think of another one. I mean, I don't. Slipknot. I don't like Slipknot, but Slipknot's another one.
My co-host on my podcast loves Slipknot.
I'm not a Slipknot fan, but you heard me play Edema coming out of the break.
Yeah,
Edema's in that category. Default for a hot second. All these musicians, they fed into this us against the world. Nobody likes us. Everyone doesn't appreciate us. That kind of emotion, right? And so there was an energy that Green Day fit into that mold that Deftones and Smashing Pumpkins didn't. The Deftones and Smashing Pumpkins, they kind of fit in more with the Sublimes and the REMs and all that stuff, where there was a generation of us that really felt like, we were ingrained. You don't trust the man. You don't trust the government. You don't trust anybody. It's us against the world. And people like Green Day fit that mold for my age group, more, I think, so than for someone like Mike Gill, where for him, he sees Smashing Pumpkins and gets excited, and I see Green Day and get excited. Is that a good explanation?
That's a good explanation. I can't believe we've gone this deep into Green Day, Smashing Pumpkins, our music taste. But listen, I'm a big music guy. I'm sure there's plenty of people out there, big music guys, gals. But you're a product. Essentially, in conclusion, essentially, is that you're a product of your time being as an adolescent. That's the kind of the music you identify
Well, the music influences you.
Yes, 100%.
Whether we want to fully admit it or not, all these elements influence who we become.
Yes.
And that was the larger point that that created a 14-minute segment. Now we have to go to break. We will get to the Joel Embiid audio.
At some point, we're going to get to Joel Embiid. There's a lot to talk about with Embiid. I mean, there's a ton with that New York Times interview that he did.
Yeah.
He got to a lot of different things in there, whether it was him being called the GOAT and what he thought about that and stuff regarding Philadelphia as well. We'll get to it. We will.
By the way, we also got to get to this Phillies lineup.
Yes.
Because I'm going to be honest with you. I like it.
You like it a lot? Is it because Christian Pache is not in it?
That's part of it, yes. No, there's something else to this lineup that I actually really like that they did. I know to some people it may be a small tweak, but I'm very interested. I'll tell you why. Coming up next, Josh Hennig, Nick Earnshaw, filling in for Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN FM and 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City.
Black Kia. The Sports Bash with Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
He's Nick Earnshaw. I'm Josh Hennig, filling in for Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN FM, the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. Before we get to the Phillies lineup, which is being brought to you by Clark's Moving and Storage. Moving is a breeze with Clark's Moving and Storage in Rio Grande. But first, Nick Earnshaw, guess what?
All right, so there's a report out there.
This is breaking news on 97.3 ESPN FM, South Jersey's sports leader.
All right, so there's a report out there, Josh, from the Braves pre- and post-game host, Kevin McAlpin. He tweets out, "Can't make this up. Whit Merrifield was working out on the field this afternoon at Truist Park and took a ball off the finger. He's currently being evaluated by the Braves medical staff." So apparently, Whit Merrifield, his first day on the job, is already hurt and injured.
That's beautiful.
How does that happen? I mean really? This guy has just had the worst season of his life. I mean, he's a former All-Star, and he's had a really good career up until this year for the most part. Like, my goodness, now he takes a ball off the finger and he's getting evaluated. Oh, jeez.
Couldn't have happened to a better guy.
Oh yeah, well,
Nitwit Merrifield.
Yeah, Nitwit's he might not even be getting to play a game for the Braves. See, that might be not happening soon.
Somewhere, Homer Sips is saying, "Don't."
Yeah, exactly. That's the exact noise that he's making. And the Braves are probably like trying to choke him out like he does with Bart. Because Are you kidding me? Off the finger?
So today's Phillies lineup being brought to you by Clark's Moving and Storage. Schwarber leading off, Turner, Harper, Bone, the normal, right? Then you got Real Muto, Castellanos, Stott, Weston Wilson in left field, and Rojas. So obviously, anybody knows I love Rojas over Pache. That's a win in my book any day of the week. But I am curious about the Weston Wilson. It is not Nick Earnshaw, not a left-handed pitcher tonight. So they are sitting Brandon Marsh against a right-handed pitcher. Now, you might be wondering why. Nick Earnshaw, did you know that Bailey Ober, who is pitching tonight for the Minnesota Twins, has a better batting average against lefties than righties?
I did not know that.
Against righties, he is allowing a 242 batting average. Against lefties is a 209 batting average. Against righties, he has a 459 slug, and against lefties, a 393 slug. So this is strategic analytics baseball that I am fascinated about, not because I like it, but because I am intrigued.
You're intrigued by it.
I'm intrigued to see if this type of chess move works out or not, because you literally have a pitcher who is better, a right-handed pitcher who is literally better against lefties than righties.
Yeah, I mean, we see Rob Thompson. He loves playing the matchup game, right? And this is kind of the obvious here of something he would do. And if the matchup's telling him that, hey, the pitcher, he pitches better against righties or lefties, whatever the case may be. In this case, he's going to sit Brandon Marsh because he pitches better against righties. Then, hey, this is it.
Fascinating move. I am very intrigued. CC, very intrigued by how this lineup plays tonight for the Philadelphia Phillies. And the Phillies lineup being brought to you by Clark's Moving and Storage of Rio Grande. Moving is a breeze with Clark's Moving and Storage. Don't forget, this is in Minnesota. So it is a 7:40 p.m. Eastern Standard Time because they are in Central Time, Nick Earns.
Yeah, so an hour behind. Just an hour behind. So not too bad.
Remember that when you do the update tonight.
I will remember. I hope. So I can't make a mistake here.
He's Nick Earnshaw. I'm Josh Jennings. We're filling in for Mike Yell here on the Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN. Coming up, more Phillies talk, more Eagles, and the Joel Embiid audio as promised.
Jersey, this is the Sports Bash with Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app. Now live from inside the Ocean Casino Resort Studio, here's Mike Gill.
Josh Hayes along with Nick Earnshaw here on 97.3 ESPN, 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City. We'll get back to the text board in just a bit at 609-403-0973. Your DMs on the 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea Isle. Phillies back in action tonight after a rough weekend in Pittsburgh. They salvaged it yesterday with the win. Tyler Phillips. Folks, Tyler Phillips has won the last 2 Phillies games in their last 6. He has single-handedly helped this team be a winning ball club, Nick Earnshaw. Meanwhile, Team USA looks like they're going to win another game. Barely.
Yeah, it looks like LeBron just hit a big shot.
I mean, this team would be nowhere without LeBron.
Yes, right now. Got to give him credit.
I mean, the man is the same age as me, and I'm sitting behind a microphone on my butt in the Ocean Casino Resort Studios.
With back problems.
And well, I got more than back problems, trust me. And LeBron is dominating international competition.
Crazy.
We are not the same.
No, unfortunately not. But listen, you have some things you probably got some stuff on LeBron, right? Like, I mean, you can talk into a microphone for 4 hours. Can he? I don't know. He needs J.J. Redick as his podcast mate, and now as his head coach. So, I mean, there's that.
I think that what I have on LeBron is just brain power. I think that I would definitely outpace LeBron in the brain power.
Do you ever see the memes going around about him and like him reading the book, walking into the locker room? It's like, LeBron, you didn't read that. Like, everyone's like, no, you did not read that. You don't know what the plot is. Stop.
Do you think LeBron actually reads book or does listen to audiobooks?
I'd say audiobooks.
I don't think he's actually read books. I think he listens to audio.
It's for the aura. It's for the style.
The optics.
The optics. Like walking in. They're just trying to be different. You know how they all want to get their picture taken walking into the stadium. It's something trying to be different.
Yeah. Speaking of different, a lot of things to get to here. Eagles report the training camp tomorrow.
Yes, they do.
And we are going to see a new offensive coordinator and a new defensive coordinator. And, this weekend, Nick, we heard a lot of interesting reporting. We touched on this with Jeff Mosher an hour ago on Football at 4 here on 97.3 ESPN. And that is, we are entering the time of year where everyone is just suddenly remembering that football is back and they're recycling information. And there's new layers coming out. So for those who didn't see this weekend, there's a new report that came out from Marcus Hayes in the Philadelphia Inquirer, right?
Yes.
And Marcus Hayes spoke to a former Eagles executive, and obviously he was on anonymity. But knowing that there are 2 Eagles executives who have left the organization in recent months, I'm assuming it's going to be one of those guys who spoke, because the information that was provided was very recent. And it was about how Eagles owner Jeffrey Lurie views Nick Sirianni. And what was interesting about this conversation is that this is now the 3rd different report to come out in the last several days, providing another layer to what's Nick Sirianni's job with the Eagles kind of thing, right? And of course, Sirianni came out today and said he's looking forward to being more of a head coach and less of a offensive overseer. I'm obviously putting words in Nick's mouth. It's not literally what he said, but that's kind of the gist of what he told the media. And what I find interesting in all this is that the source told Marcus Hayes that part of the reason why Eagles owner Jeffrey Lurie, the reason why the Eagles owner wanted to keep Nick Sirianni was because he views Sirianni as, quote, potentially the next Andy Reid, because Sirianni is and I'm quoting here, a football nerd, a maniacal teacher, a passionate leader with the capacity to become an excellent administrator, a skill that took Reid more than a decade to master. Now, you could argue that part of the reason why Sirianni is appealing in this sense to Jeffrey Lurie has to do with the previous head coach. People forget that one of the reasons why Doug Peterson is no longer here is because Doug Peterson wanted not just to call the offense. Doug Peterson had the famous quote, I think it was 2019 or 2020. He might have said it both years, where he said, what's the point of being head coach if I can't call the plays? And that kind of like shirked people the wrong way, right? That was kind of people were like, oh man, what are you saying that for, man? Like, that's kind of ridiculous. And he was very dead set on having his people, Press Taylor, and those guys, Mike Groh, and he wanted them on his staff. And the Eagles owner did not think it was a good idea. Nick Sirianni now has allowed Howie Roseman and the Eagles organization to handpick some of his, if not all, of his coaches. And I will just remind folks of what Jason Kelsey said on the New Heights podcast a few months ago about an example of what makes Nick Sirianni such a great head coach.
Nick moving to like a head coaching position, you removed himself from play calling duties with Shane Steichen, right? Yeah. That ended up working out pretty damn good. Nick has shown in his tenure with the Eagles that he's going to do whatever he thinks is in the best interest of the Philadelphia Eagles. And he's going to make those decisions, and he doesn't care about how other people perceive it. He doesn't care about anything other than what's in the best interest of the team. And to me, I think players respect the hell out of coaches that operate on that level.
And it goes back to this quote from Sirianni recently with the Philadelphia media. He said, quote, at the end of the day, I have to do what's best for the team, and sometimes it is hard. And like, I won't lie to you, it was hard, but I knew in my gut what was best for the team. And I see a lot of positives, he says, in bringing in Kellen Moore. He says, I let him run the offense. We share thoughts, but he goes with it, implying again, this is Kellen Moore's offense, Nick Earnshaw. It is not Nick Sirianni's, unlike what last year, remember it was Diana Rossini who said it on the Scoop City podcast, which I am going to contend they got to change that name.
Another podcast you've added to your list.
See, I'm almost at the point where I don't even care about adding the podcast. I don't like the name.
You got to change it. You need some input then. You got to leave a comment or some angry comment.
They should have called me.
Yeah, angry comment, something like that.
I think our audience on 97.3 ESPN come up with a better name than the Scoop City podcast with Diana Rossini and Chase Daniel from The Athletic. This is what they said last week.
He had that great relationship with Jalen in the quarterback room the year they went to the Super Bowl. So they had that good dynamic. Then he becomes the OC last year. And it was Nick Sirianni's show. Everything you saw on that field was Sirianni. And from just having a few discussions with people in Philadelphia, it just seems that Nick just wanted to do it his way. And he's the head coach. If that's what he wants to do.
Seems like it wore him down, though, throughout the year. Like, you can see his bags under his eyes. You can see everything. It's like too much for a head coach.
So we're starting to see a picture be painted here, right? That the organization views Sirianni, that his potential is as this CEO-style coach. John Harbaugh, Dan Campbell, right? Those type of head coaches. And that Sirianni is starting to understand what everyone else is seeing. And it's a very interesting perspective that all this information is coming out as we are reporting for training camp tomorrow, Nick, because we are seeing that Nick Sirianni is, at least as what we're seeing reported, accepting of this recalibrated role. Because remember, as Jason Kelsey said, he's already done this. He's already succeeded play calling to someone before. Previously it's Shane Steichen. Now it's Kellen Moore. The difference is that he did it with Shane Steichen in the middle of the 2021 season. He's doing it before the 2024 season, which might be another sign why the Eagles will be better this year, is because Sirianni is making this decision and on board with it before the season ever begins.
Yeah, so you're not even getting to that point in the season where you got to make the change, right? Like you did a couple years back. And I think that's, something that we've heard a lot now is he's going to be kind of this manager, CEO type of head coach. And he's going to delegate to his people, essentially. Hey, you're going to take care of this. I'm the delegator. I'll make suggestions, but you're going to have the final say, essentially. And that's kind of what we're expecting out of the offense this year, that Kellen Moore basically has total control of what's going to happen on the offensive side of things for the Birds. So I think it's a sign of a little bit of maturity, saying, all right, I got to take a step back and do what I did a couple years ago that really worked before we get into this spot where, maybe we're going to have to change things up mid-season. We're going into the season with how things are going to be on offense. Like, Kellen Moore has the final say on what the offense is going to look like, play calling, etc. And Nick Sirianni can just kind of be the guy who's delegating and saying, okay, what if we do this here, and making suggestions, but I'm going to leave it to the pros, essentially, I guess you could say, on what to do.
Well, we mentioned Andy Reid, right?
Yep.
What is Andy Reid and coaches like him, because they are so involved in the play calling, they actually have coaches who tell them how much time is on the clock, how many timeouts they have left. They recommend if they should do reviews to them. Like, Nick Sirianni now falls in the other direction. Because he is overseeing the game, okay? And this is nothing new. I mentioned Dan Campbell and John Harbaugh have done this. Bill Parcells did this in the 80s.
Most known.
People forget that Parcells, Bill Belichick ran Parcells' defense, but Parcells was not overlording over him.
Right.
And one of the reasons why they were so successful was because he told the offensive and defense coordinators, do your job so I don't have to do it for you.
Well, the interesting thing from the article that Marcus Hayes put out in the Inquirer is what he talked about with Kellen Moore. Like, if Jalen Hurts has a really good year this year, right, and Kellen Moore goes off, gets a head coaching job, because we've heard Kellen Moore's name come up as a head coach before. And he's interviewed for numerous teams to be a head coach. Now he comes to Philadelphia as the offensive coordinator, which is what he's done with the Cowboys, what he's done with the Chargers. So if he leaves, they kind of view this similar to the way Andy Reid's relationship and Jim Johnson's relationship. This is kind of, I'm paraphrasing from Marcus Hayes' article. They want it to kind of be Sirianni and Fangio as the next kind of duo, and make Fangio kind of the vice president head coach, essentially the co-head coach. I guess you could kind of say, in a sense, to Nick Sirianni, and them, be at the top of things, managing of what's going on.
He's Nick Earnshaw. I'm Josh Hennick, filling for Mike Gill on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. And it's funny you mentioned about the progression of this, right?
Yeah.
Because remember, it was a big controversial thing recently that Jalen Hurts was not a top 10 quarterback in the ESPN Plus rankings, right? And part of the reason why he wasn't, Jeremy Fowler on Get Up said this.
Nick Sirianni's attack with Philly last year was just not very good. I mean,
we're in a situation where they kind of rolled the ball out, tried to do what they did the year before. Teams adjusted. Eagles didn't evolve, so Hurts was in a position where he just wasn't highlighted. I will point out that a lot of voters say, even though he's very good, he's never really going to be a top 5 quarterback in the eyes of a lot of evaluators. They say he's sort of in that 7 to 13 range, depending on how he does that year.
So we are literally in an NFL where how the coach puts the player in a position to be successful is how we judge that player. So for the Philadelphia Eagles, if that's how the league looks at Hurts, right? For whether you agree with it or not, okay? Whether you agree with it or not, that Hurts is being judged based on the coaches putting him in a position to be successful. Now it's even more of a burden on Philadelphia to put Hurts in a position to be successful because they're paying him all this money.
Yeah, it's fascinating, Josh. Like with what happened last year and the reports coming out that it was mainly Sirianni, right? Like calling the plays, having mainly his ideas involved in the offense. And Jalen Hurts now for another year is learning a brand new offense again. So it's an interesting dynamic to see what can happen. And I just brought up, Josh, like if it was Kellen Moore again, that's another new offensive coordinator that'll be brought in here. So does it kind of hurt you in a sense that, yeah, Sirianni, like if he's going to have to step in and be the voice of reason on offense and, take bigger control like he did last year, is that going to be an issue going down the road?
See, I think the fact that Sirianni now has twice given the reins willingly to somebody else.
Yeah.
I think that is what the actual good sign is.
Right.
Because remember, you mentioned Hurts has had multiple coordinators.
Yes.
Only once.
Since high school.
Since high school. He had a different coordinator every year at Alabama. Then he went to Oklahoma. Then he came to Philadelphia. He went from Dougie P to Sirianni Steichen. And then he finally had 2 years of Steichen. Then he had Brian Johnson last year, Kellen Moore this year. So you could maybe argue there's two sides of that coin, right?
Yeah.
Is Hurts just that experienced at making the change? Like, do we give him credit for being a guy who knows how to, weave in and out of these different coordinators? Or do we also say most players are at their best when they have continuity? They're we see with the Sixers with Joel Embiid. How much of the 76ers' success and failure is because Joel Embiid has a different roster every year?
Right. And he even talked about that in the Times interview, like having continuity and, having someone there over and over again. So, you have some familiarity there. And it's something that Jalen Hurts really hasn't had in his career ever. So does it make it easier for him to adjust on the fly as you're learning something new every year? Like, that's the question. Like, do we give him enough credit for that? Because it is different. Like, Kelly, he talked about it in one of his first press conferences this offseason about how, it's the 95% different offense. And Joel Embiid is kind of the same thing here, Josh. Like, he has had a roster turnover that's been crazy. And he talked about it in the New York Times article.
Speaking of Jalen Hurts,
there's been a lot of new inventory in, majority of it, probably 95% of it being new. And so it's just been that process, and it's been a fun process because you get to see what works for other people. And the number of coaches that I've had since I've been here, I've been able to take in a lot of new knowledge and new understanding. And so I think the goal coming in was to learn Kellen's offense and master it. And I think that's been a process. And I think by the end of it, I want it to be mine and have it in my own way.
And I think that mentality is part of the reason why, for as much hoopla there has been about Sirianni and Hurts, is that both men are approaching their jobs in the right mindset.
Yes.
I think that, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what your name is. No, I'm just kidding. It doesn't matter that Sirianni and Hurts have the greatest relationship in the world. What matters is if both men go out and do their jobs to the best of their ability, this organization is going to be just fine.
Yeah, if they both go out there and Sirianni's able to delegate, right, and be that kind of just game manager, head coach, CEO, and let the coordinators do their thing, and Jalen Hurts is able to go out there, feel comfortable in the offense, and Kellen Moore puts him in a position to utilize his strengths, they're going to be just fine because they have the talent on this team to be a really good team heading into next year. So, yeah, I think if both are real, this team went to a Super Bowl a couple of years ago, right? Like Sirianni and Hurts have been there. They've won a championship in the NFC. They've gone to a Super Bowl. They've been in big games before. So it's not like this thing is new. They've done it before. Let's kind of rehash and get back to where you once were and being on the same page and feeling comfortable in the offense. And I think that's something that you're probably going to see this year with the way they've handled the offseason and bringing in Kellen Moore and delegating Nick Sirianni into being that CEO head coach.
And I don't buy into this theory that it was a fluke, 2022. Yeah. I don't, because, Emory Hunt, I've had him numerous times over the years talking about Jalen Hurts. People conveniently overlook the fact that Hurts was the runner-up for the Heisman at Oklahoma. He had a phenomenal offensive season. He was one of the leaders in all of college football in completion percentage, in total touchdowns. That wasn't a fluke. You don't go from Alabama to Oklahoma and just accidentally, because if that's the case, then why was Baker Mayfield and Kyler Murray drafted number 1 overall? They both left old systems, came to Oklahoma, had amazing seasons, right? So why do we make the exception for Hurts? And I think part of the problem is, at the end of the day, you heard how Hurts talked. Jalen is not flashy. He's not exciting. He's not Bryce Harper screaming, at the fans. Yeah. He's not Joel Embiid doing the DX chop. Jalen is stoic. Jalen is, his blood runs colder than ice at times. And that is what you need from a quarterback in an environment like Philadelphia, because no offense to Donovan McNabb, no offense to any of the past quarterbacks in Philadelphia's history, Kevin Kolb, Sam Bradford, those guys were a little too emotionally led for this city. The reason why Carson Wentz failed in Philadelphia, because he was too impacted by stuff emotionally and mentally and so on and so forth. If you don't have the mental prerequisites, if you don't have the intangibles, you're not going to be successful in cities like Philadelphia and New York, these environments that demand so much of their quarterbacks. You could argue that whoever followed Tom Brady in New England was always going to fail because they had to follow Tom Brady, right? So, unless you are built a certain way, you may not enjoy the way Jalen communicates. You may find him boring, but you could argue he is best equipped for the job.
Yeah, and there's been criticism on how he leads, right? And what is his leadership style? Is he too quiet? Why isn't he talking to guys on the sideline? And that was a whole conversation last year and through the offseason, right? And Nick Sirianni's a little bit different. Nick Sirianni wears his emotions on his sleeves. And he's had plenty of criticism on should he be that emotional on the sideline? Should he be that outspoken on certain things? They're just two different personalities, but we've seen those two different personalities work together before and get deep into the playoffs and be on the same page. Last season, the communication just wasn't there. We've heard from numerous players say that. So maybe you learn from that. And this is kind of a little bit of the growing pains of a young head coach, a young quarterback in the NFL. And they've had tons of success already. Now they take a step back. They had a little bit of a struggle last year to end the season. Now heading this season, do they rectify it with all the changes that have been made?
He's Nick Earnshaw. I'm Josh Henning. This is the Sports Bash with 97.3 ESPN FM, 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Seattle City. We'll touch on the Joel Embiid comments coming up next as promised and get your guys' reactions as well. Eagles reporting a training camp tomorrow. Phillies salvage the weekend in Pittsburgh and head to Minnesota tonight. And Joel Embiid said what exactly? We'll get to your guys' thoughts and comments throughout the hour here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN FM, 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City.
We have the perfect...
Drive into summer with the Honda CRV and Accord, your fun-to-drive weekend getaway vehicles. From Honda, the 2024 Kelley Blue Book's KBB.com Best Value brand. So hurry in to the Honda Summer Event. For a limited time, well-qualified buyers can get a 2.9% APR on a 2025 CRV or 2024 Accord.
See dealer for financing details based on 2024 Consumer Choice Awards from Kelley Blue Book. Visit KBB.com for more information.
You're sitting in traffic. You come with me. The Sports Bash with Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app.
Don't forget, this Friday is the boxing event of the summer at Tropicana Atlantic City Showroom, where 97.3 ESPN will join you to watch the fights this Saturday as undefeated junior middleweight Justin Figueroa returns to action, along with Absecamia High School graduate Bruce Sullivan Jr. and top-rated heavyweight Otto Whalen are all in action this Friday night at Tropicana Atlantic City Showroom. Tickets are on sale right now at Ticketmaster.com. We will have limited pairs to give away starting tomorrow on 97.3 ESPN. So if you don't get your hand on the tickets through the contest, when we give them away tomorrow and Wednesday, you can always go to Ticketmaster.com. Don't miss the boxing event of the summer. All the jam-packed action. We know the first event for Boxing Insider Promotions was a big hit at Tropicana Atlantic City. You don't want to miss the second show of the year from Boxing Insider Promotions this Friday, July 26th, Tropicana Atlantic City. Tickets on sale, Ticketmaster.com. All right. So, Nick, we've been promising this Joel Embiid audio. So,
yes.
Give the audience a little context on why we have another Joel Embiid talking to random media interview.
So, I mean, I guess because they're, Team USA is playing right now, gearing up for the Olympics. He does a big interview with the New York Times, and they talked about a litany of things, whether it was Team USA, playing for the U.S. national team, with the Sixers, his career at large, his life at large as well. I mean, they kind of hit on a multitude of topics in this conversation, but there was a few things that stuck out regarding the 76ers and his career. And Josh, he talked about kind of, how long he's been in Philadelphia and if he was going to stay here for the final remaining years of his career.
I love Philly. I've been here, for 10 years, and it's looking like going to be here for a long time, and actually having the opportunity to finish my career here if they let me, if they want to.
I thought that was hysterical. If they let me, if they want to. I think everyone wants Joel Embiid to finish his career in Philadelphia. I mean, the guy has been through a ton in his time in Philly. I think he will finish his career. But
it's a genuine answer.
It's a genuine, real answer.
He's saying, look, I want to be here, but if for whatever reason they don't want me anymore, then I don't want to be where I'm not wanted, kind of thing. And I think that's a normal human answer. Everyone in life wants to be where they wanted, right? They want to work with people they get along with. They want to be at a job that appreciates them. They don't want to be somewhere where they feel like nobody likes them or no one wants them.
Yeah, and with Embiid, he'll always give you the truth and what he's feeling, right? And what he's thinking. And this is kind of the exact type of thing here where he's telling you, if they want me, I'll stay. If they don't, maybe I'll go. Essentially, that's kind of what he was saying in that quote right there. But then, he talked about, he got in depth about playing in Philadelphia, and they bring in Paul George. They've had a lot of roster turnover, 3 head coaches, and he was kind of asked about what had playing in Philadelphia and seeing all of the new faces every single year has been like as Joel Embiid, as the guy who's the face of the franchise.
And then the players, every single year is like new co-star, like new players. And when you start looking at teams that have won, whether it's Golden State, Boston this year, Denver last year, those guys have been together for a long time. And then they just added a few other pieces that were able to take them over the top. I mean, you go through the years, the Jimmy year, we had a pretty good team. And then we end up losing on a game-winning buzzer beater, against the eventual champions. The way I look at it is like, you got so close, and instead of what can we do to make the team better, but also having the same core, change the whole team. No continuity.
And that's been a consistent message from Joel. I don't think that in of itself is controversial. I appreciate the context from him and him saying, look, let me tell you how I feel.
Yeah.
Let me be as detailed as possible. And he pointed to Jimmy Butler. And it's well known that Joel wanted Jimmy to stay here.
Yep.
It's well known that Joel, wanted Brett Brown to be the head coach for as long as possible. It's well known that, Joel has been looking for stability for a long time. And I'm sure there's a part of Joel that feels like, the constant changes around him have certainly probably limited, at least for him, some of the team's success.
Yeah, and it's not just on the floor. It's the head coach. It's in the front office. Like, there's been no sustainability with any of those aspects of the Sixers organization. You look at the roster, they've changed every year. He's had James Harden as a co-star. Ben Simmons fell apart. Markelle Fultz didn't work out. Jimmy Butler was here. He didn't stay. Now you're at Paul George. And he mentioned Boston, Golden State, and the Denver Nuggets. Those are teams that have played together for a while and have kept the same core for the most part, and that just hasn't happened with the 76ers. Like, they have not been able to keep a core really together for a sustainable amount of time, and I could see why that would be frustrating for Joel Embiid as someone who's been the cornerstone and been here through all of that and everything and all the turnover that has gone on with the Sixers.
Now, the comment that's been getting the most social media traction, is the next one we're going to play. And I know you brought it up on your PM update for the question of the day. This is the exact audio of what Joel said about what could have been if it wasn't for the injuries.
If you think about it, the thing that has stopped me all these years is, just freak injuries. Every single playoffs, regular season, people falling on my knee, someone breaking my face twice. It's always about freak injuries at the wrong time. Like, I really believe that because I would have been, if I was more healthy, I think it would have been a different story.
I don't blame Joel for feeling that way. You should always have confidence in yourself.
Yeah.
You should always have self-belief. But he's got to understand, or at least someone needs to tell him about basketball history, because there's nobody in sports history who was considered one of the greats even if they had injuries. This is a universal, okay? And I don't blame Joel for having the self-belief. But we can do the what-if game with everyone, right? I mean, name me fill-in-the-blank player whose career was derailed. Bo Jackson with the hip injury, right? If you want to throw out there Terrell Davis, the Denver Broncos running back. Now, Davis is in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Bo Jackson's in the College Football Hall of Fame. So it's not like those guys didn't get their recognition. Bill Walton, his career was marred by a gazillion injuries. He's in the Basketball Hall of Fame. Eric Lindros, his career was derailed by a gazillion concussions. Well, guess what? He's in the Hockey Hall of Fame. So I don't think anyone is going to look at the Joel's career and say he stunk because of the injuries. But I do think what Joel needs to understand is that when you say something like that, it's going to be looked at a certain way. Whether he is aware of that or not is a different story.
Yeah, and you're talking about being in the GOAT conversation, right? With Michael Jordan, LeBron James. Well, what if? I mean, you could say that, like you mentioned, with a ton of different players across all sports. Like, you can do that in hindsight, right? Like, all right, if he didn't get hurt, then maybe they get past the second round, right? If he doesn't get hit in the face, he doesn't get hit, they move on, right? And you can do the same thing with Ben Simmons. There's so many what ifs in sports, but that's just how it is at this point in his career. Like, he has been known to be injury prone. I mean, it's the same thing. Can we just get Joel to the playoffs healthy, right? It's every single year. It's unfortunate. You don't want to see guys get hurt. You don't want to see the best players go down, but it's a part of what his career has been. And The talent is there. Like, he's one of the most talented players I've ever seen. But you got to have all the accolades, the championships, everything to go into that conversation. There's so much that goes into it when you're debating who is the GOAT. And he just doesn't have it. If he was fully healthy, I don't know, maybe he's like in the conversation for top 10 all time. Who knows where it could go? You don't know. But that's what you do in hindsight. And right now, they are where they are. He's had a really good career. He'll probably get into the Hall of Fame, but he's not going to be in that conversation. And it shouldn't matter if he's in that conversation. What should matter is winning a title. And that's the number one concern for Sixers fans overall.
Speaking of Sixers fans, the final part of what Joel Embiid said that I personally was the most interested in is what he had to say about said Philadelphia 76er fans to the New York Times.
I used to interact with the fans and always be laughing, and from then I just became more serious. And I think a lot of people in Philadelphia that think I don't care and I don't care about basketball or because I'm not doing what they used to. I'm not having fun. No, I'm still having fun. I'm just so focused. I don't have the energy to just be interacting with it. I'm just trying to do the job. I'm just different. I'm more serious. I'm more mature. I don't need to be doing that all the time.
I think this is where Joel is completely wrong.
Really?
Everything else I heard, I understand. I mean, I agree with it, but I understand it, okay? Joel Embiid, like a lot of people in this world, are taking what a handful of people say on social media and projecting it to an entire group of people. All 20,000 people who show up for a 76ers game are not one and the same in their opinion about Joel Embiid. Ever. I think the majority of fans appreciate and like Embiid. I think the majority of fans understand that most of his injuries have not been his fault and that they empathize with him in that manner. And I think a lot of fans appreciate his heart, his energy, and his desire to win.
Yeah, I mean, because he also mentioned in that interview somewhere about playing through injuries. He wants to play. Like, he doesn't want to sit on the sidelines. And that's kind of been evident throughout the last season.
Yeah, and I think most Sixer fans understand.
They realize that, yes.
The problem is what Joel is doing is what a large segment of people in our society are starting to do in general.
Yeah.
Which is they're taking this small group of loud, obnoxious schmucks and saying everyone is a schmuck, okay? And the problem is that when you start putting everyone into the same category, you lose conversation. There's no more dialogue. We're seeing it in every facet of life. We're seeing it in the political sphere. We're seeing it in the music sphere. We're seeing it in now the sports sphere. And that is, people don't want to listen to anything except for what they want to hear many times. They don't want to hear, they don't want to see, they only like and know what they want. And there's a small group of people who are so loud and so obnoxious and so ignorant, okay? They're not ignorant, they're ignorant, that they are now being perceived as the voice of the population, when it's not true, okay? I think this is the reason why I am concerned, because Joel is speaking about a perception of him that has been propagated by a specific group of people, and it is not the entire fan base.
I agree with you there. I don't think it's the majority of the fan base, but there is a faction of the fan base that complains a lot about Joel Embiid and the way he goes about his business, etc. And I think he's just kind of buying into that aspect of it, right? Like,
but that's a bad job by him.
But like, it's still there though. There's a faction of the fan base that gets frustrated with Joel Embiid.
Guess what? There's a faction of people who tweet at me and tell me that I shouldn't be on the radio and that I stink and that I'm stupid, I'm illiterate, and I'm a.
What you're saying is you shouldn't pay attention to it.
I think he's empowering it too much. And what concerns me is that it's because he has given too much credibility to that faction, is part of the reason why he's having these interviews.
Well, we remember, I mean, he was Joel Trollel, right? Like, he was the troll on Twitter. And he kind of mentioned that in the interview, like, that once he had a son, like, he didn't want to, be that troll anymore. He wanted to set an example. And that's part of the reason he's not interacting with the fans. Like, interacting with the fans in person as well as online. Like, he doesn't want to interact with them online.
But that should be the emphasis. It shouldn't be, well, there's a group of people who say this about me.
Right.
Like, if the most successful people in the world either do one of two things. They're like Michael Jordan, and they take everything said about them and they use it as fuel, or they just don't give a darn and they just do what they're going to do anyway.
So you're saying he shouldn't even just block it out. Just don't even bring it up when you're asked about it.
One of the two. You don't dwell on it. You don't let it consume. You don't let it dictate your series of affairs. And what bothers me is that because I think he's letting it dictate his thinking a little bit, that it's the reason why he's doing all these interviews with non-local media outlets. I think that he has a perception that the fans and the media are both against him at times.
Yeah.
And I think that's completely incorrect because I personally know so many people who cover the team. There's never been a point in time where in any of my conversations with Keith Pompey from the Philadelphia Inquirer, with Austin Crowler, Sixers insider from 97.3 ESPN.com, with Paul Hudrick from Liberty Ballers, okay, with Devon Givens, who now works for Philly Sports, right? Okay, none of these guys, and I can name more, Derek Bodner, okay?
There's plenty of them.
Okay, none of them have ever expressed on or off the record this type of perception of Embiid.
No.
And so the fact that he is seemingly going out of his way to talk to the New York Times and Fox Sports and ESPN instead of talking to the local reporters who know and understand him better than anyone, I think limits the conversation that Joel Embiid can have with the fans.
Do you think because it's more of a comfortability factor that he can go to an outsider who doesn't know the day in, day out of what's happened here in Philadelphia with the 76ers, with Joel Embiid, that it's easier for him to go to that outlet and speak his mind more freely? He's not going to get pushback here, and he's going to get harder questions from local media on certain aspects of his game and the way he goes about his business.
I think he thinks but that perception is wrong.
Right. I think that's a perception he has, though. I think that's kind of why
part of the problem, because now he thinks the fans and the media are against him. And I think this is the danger that we're in. If he thinks that people are against him, how do we bring him back from that? And I don't know if we can if he's already made this decision.
And did it help because of when the New York Knicks fans took over the stadium? Did that help him and now kind of show where he's at mentally?
A little bit.
Like where he's with the fans.
He made the comment.
Yeah.
He was upset about it. He didn't like it. And there are a lot of Sixer fans who have tried to verbalize that it has nothing to do with Embiid. It is not Joel. It is not the team.
It's everything else.
It's all the other stuff with the organization.
Yep.
The majority of Sixer fans' frustrations with the Sixers has nothing to do with the players on the court. It has everything to do with the ownership and the front office and how they have handled their business. It has not been about Joel. And I think Joel, I really wish there was someone in his life to help him understand to not take some of this stuff personally.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think that the New York Knicks fans taking over exemplified kind of what he perceived to be the perception of him, right? Like, all right, they're not going to show up to the playoffs game when I'm playing in. I'm out there on a bad knee. I have Bell's palsy. Like, I think he kind of took that a little bit personally in a sense.
And I think that the problem is that a lot of people in our society take stuff personal.
Yep.
When it's not you. Many times people who hate on other people, they're projecting. It's a reflection of who they are.
Right.
It's not a reflection of who you are. How someone perceives you many times has nothing to do with actually you.
Yep.
It has to do with how they view you through the prism of their reality. And it seems like for whatever reason, Joel doesn't have the people in his life that help him understand that.
Yep, it's fascinating because he's doing all these national media interviews, and I feel like it's more comfortable and it's like a safe space for him, right? Like he's not going to get pushed back, he's not going to get critiqued as much if he did it with local media, and that's the perception he has.
He's Nick Earnshaw. I'm Josh Hennig. This is the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN FM. 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank. See how we'll get to Steve from Cape May Courthouse. his text, and more as we wrap up the Sports Bash. Don't forget, tonight from 6 to 7, Nick Earnshaw is filling in on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN.
It's chicken tacos should only be trusted to chicken professionals.
That's where we come in. Introducing Zaxby's new chicken finger tacos. One comes with pico de gallo and creamy chipotle ranch. And the other comes with bacon, lettuce, tomato, and avocado ranch. Chicken experts since 1990. Chicken taco experts since now. Order yours today in the Zax Rewards app. Woo, saucy! Zaxby's.
With Mike Gill.
Do I have everybody's attention now?
On 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app.
Wrapping up the Sports Bash, Josh Hennig and Nick Earnshaw have been filling in for Mike Gill here on 97.3 ESPN. For those who haven't noticed, I have purposely played every song
from your generation.
From that, what did I say, like 97 to like 2005 or whatever it was?
Yeah, I don't even know. I guess that's your wheelhouse?
Well, it's not my wheelhouse, but it was like my formative years.
Okay,
It's like from when you're 12 to 22 years old, and everything hits you differently.
I was -3 to 5 during that time period. Okay?
Yeah, shut up. All right, let's finish out on the text board, 609-403-0973. I promised I would get to Steve at KMA Courthouse, okay? Because he has an opinion about Joel Embiid and his comment about being the greatest of all time.
Okay.
He says, there are all-time greats. Michael Jordan. LeBron James is a close second in my opinion. Then you have guys like Hakeem, Ewing, David Robinson, Tim Duncan, to name a few. Steve KMA Courthouse says, Joel could not have been better than any of those big men, even if he stayed injury-free. Did he have more talent than those dudes? Yes, he did. All of them. But to be an all-time great, you have to play with heart, and the all-time greats played with heart. Joel Embiid has not always done that. Your reaction?
I think there have been times he hasn't given his all, right? And I think it's partly to do with the injury. I'll get into this more in the next hour for a little bit with Embiid, but I think he does show heart. I think he does, especially in the past couple years with all the injuries.
Nick Earnshaw's got you for the Power Hour known as Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. I'll be back on Game Night tomorrow because Mike Gill will be back in the saddle. He makes his triumphant return to the radio tomorrow on 97.3 ESPN FM, the 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea Isle.